What do we see on the surface of megacities? Millions of people rushing somewhere, cars stuck in traffic, skyscrapers stretching into the sky, storefront lights, noise, endless movement. This is the picture we are used to seeing every day. But do we ever think about what lies deeper? Beneath the asphalt, beneath the houses, beneath the noisy squares? Because there's a whole different world right under our feet. A world where ancient burials lie next to modern tunnels and forgotten catacombs next to massive utility lines. Down there, people once hid from enemies, built secret cities, buried their rulers, and created underground empires. Why do we keep going underground again and again? To survive, to hide what cannot be shown above, or to leave a message for future generations? Today, we'll take a look at the world's greatest cities from another side, the one usually hidden from our eyes. What lies beneath the world's largest capitals?
This amazing city is a melting pot of cultures. According to archaeologists, this area has been inhabited for more than 6,000 years. Since then, it's rapidly grown and developed, stretching over more than 1,500 square kilometers, making it one of the largest cities in Europe by area. More than 8 million people call it home. It was also one of the most popular tourist destinations. In 2023 alone, this location was visited by 19.2 million foreign tourists. This is where ancient Roman ruins coexist with modern skyscrapers and old catacombs, with metro lines. We're talking about London. Yes, you heard it right. There are Roman ruins in London, and they're located underground. And this is not the only amazing attraction hidden under London. Today we will descend step by step into the underground depths of this amazing city and find out what is under London. So, London. Let's first see what's underfoot. First, there's a layer of paving stone, 5 to 10 centimeters thick. Then there's a further 20 centimeters of soil. At a depth of 45 to 60 centimeters, electric cables run under sidewalks and roadways. At a depth of 45 to 75 centimeters, we'll also come across gas pipelines. They can even be laid under footpaths and highways. So what's next? Well, for starters, we're going to visit a very nice place, a spa to be precise. But it's not just any spa, it's underground. To get there, you'll go down into the basement of an office building on Lower Thames Street. It's called Billingsgate Roman House and Baths. And while we're down there, let's bring you up to speed. In 1848, builders constructing the new coal exchange in the London city came across a magnificent Roman building. They realised the importance of the find, so they preserved its remains in the basement of the building. The next stage of the excavations took place 100 years later. In the 1960s, the coal exchange was demolished and a new building was built on the site. Further excavations were carried out there. The ruins were preserved in the basement of this new building. During the excavations, archaeologists determined that the Roman house was built at the end of the 2nd century. The rooms on the east side even had heated floors. The house once overlooked the Thames. At that time, the river was much broader than it is today. However, this pleasant view was eventually spoiled when the walls were built on the riverside walls, and the house and its large yard were in the shadow. What do you do with land that no longer offers a beautiful river sight? According to some speculation, the loss of the pretty view was the reason for the building of the baths. Well, here we are. This complex was in use until the early 5th century AD. Several hundred coins from the late 4th century were found during excavations. However, by the year 500, the house was probably in ruins. And it wasn't the only one. In the early 5th century, the Roman city, then Londinium, not London, fell. Some historians say it happened in 410 when the Roman Emperor Honorius refused to help the people of Britain suffering from barbarian raids. The Romans left, and many of London's buildings became piles of overgrown rubble. Later, the Saxons began to build their dwellings on the site. But their buildings didn't last as long because of the wars. Such a cycle of construction and deconstruction lasted for 1,000 years. And all this time, deep under the ruins of several eras were the Roman baths and house, which survived the Great Fire of 1666 and the Blitz, the bombardment of Britain by the aircraft of Hitler's Germany. Now, let's go through the Town Hall Art Gallery in the City of London. That's where the entrance to our next location is. Or rather, what's left of it. These remnants are about 8 meters, 26 feet underground, under layers of construction debris and rubble. No, we're not in Rome, we're still in London. More specifically, the Roman era London Amphitheatre. You were probably expecting something more like an amphitheatre, not just the remains of a walls and a drainage system. Let's get the imagination going. And if that's a problem, we have the help of an impressive digital projection that works at this location to fill the gaps. The amphitheatre was built in 70 AD. What's remarkable is that it was located inside the city, whereas most ancient amphitheatres were located outside. It was reconstructed at the beginning of the 2nd century. The entrances were paved with tiles and the walls were made of stone. The capacity of the amphitheatre grew to 6,000 people. At that time, the arena was used for public and religious events, animal fights, public executions, and gladiatorial fights. Remember when we said that the ancient Romans left Londinium and it fell into disrepair? Well, a couple of centuries later, the amphitheatre was abandoned. What's more, most of it was dismantled for building materials, and so it looked like this for hundreds of years. The situation changed in the 11th century when the overpopulation of London forced the territory to be reclaimed. According to some sources, in the 12th century, the first London town hall was built nearby. Later, in the 15th century, the Guildhall appeared here, preserved despite the Great Fire of London and the Blitz, which we've already mentioned. Various other buildings were built around the amphitheatre, which became the public square of the town court. Let us now carefully walk around these remnants of sand. It is the same sand that covered the arena in the ancient times to absorb the gladiators' blood from their wounds. And now we'll need to look in several places to find lost locations that were once an essential part of the London landscape. In many parts of the city today, you could be standing just steps away from one of the lost rivers and not even realize it. Although just steps away is quite a mouthful, we must go as much as 11 meters, 36 feet underground to find some of them. First, let's move to London's St. Pancras Road in central London. Take a look at the glass and steel skyscrapers of the Euston Road nearby. It's hard to imagine that there were once grassy fields with a river running through the middle, right? Nevertheless, near St. Pancras Old Church, there is a plaque depicting people bathing at this very spot on the banks of the River Fleet in 1827. This river is one of many in London that have been buried underground. Dozens of rivers and canals were buried beneath the streets of London over a century ago. But why did they end up underground, and what do they look like today? These rivers were used for collecting drinking water and for fishing. But the River Fleet, for example, became heavily polluted when butchers in the Smithfield area started dumping the remains of dead animals into it. Eventually, it became simply part of the sewer system. Another underground river is the River Tyburn, which runs through Regent's Park under Buckingham Palace. It was once considered a perfect place for salmon fishing in London. The Tyburn Fishing Society has even proposed to restore the river as a prime fishing river. This is a rather ambitious and unfeasible plan, to say the least. To achieve this goal, they would have to destroy billions of pounds worth of property, including Buckingham Palace itself. The River Effra, on the other hand, is hidden under the Oval Cricket Ground. However, in the 1950s, the river again showed itself and caused flooding of the cricket pitch. Due to excessive rainfall, the sewer overflowed. And these are just some of London's underground rivers. They now pass through culverts and are part of London's sewerage system. The courses of many of these rivers have been altered. Today, the Wildlife Gardeners of Haggerston and the Thames Catchment Community Eels Project are engaging volunteers in restoring some of the lost rivers. Volunteers have already succeeded in releasing the Old Lee River in the Hackney Marsh area and the Indian Creek in Albany Park. These efforts not only improve the environment, but also reduce flood risks. Now, let's go one more meter down, and in the process, we'll learn an entertaining story. In times of crises and wars, everything changes, and the leaders of countries also have to change their way of life. So Winston Churchill, during the Second World War, spent a lot of time under the ground in a bunker located 12 meters, 40 feet underground. Let's have a look inside. It's quite feasible because now it's a museum at a depth of 12 meters. It includes the Cabinet War Rooms, an historic underground complex that housed the British government's command centre during World War II, and the Churchill Biographical Museum. The Cabinet War Rooms, located under the Treasury Building in Westminster, began construction in 1938 and opened a year later, in 1939, a week before Britain declared war on Germany.
They operated throughout World War II and were last used on August 16, 1945, the day after victory over Japan Day.
In total, 115 meetings were held in the Cabinet War Rooms. 2 rooms were of particular importance, and the first was the map room. It was constantly used by officers of the Royal Navy, British Army and Royal Air Force. They were responsible for the daily intelligence summary for the King and the Prime Minister and the Chiefs of Staff of the Armed Forces. And the other key place here is the Cabinet Room. After being appointed Prime Minister, Winston Churchill visited it in May 1940 and declared, "This is the room from which I will direct the war." Here the Prime Minister and his key advisors met with the 3 Chiefs of Staff, the heads of the Army, Navy and Air Force. Of course, the meetings, which sometimes stretched into the morning, were held in strict secrecy. 2 sentries were on duty at the door. Other interesting rooms here were Churchill's bedroom and the transatlantic telephone room, a tiny room disguised as a private toilet for top secrecy. Here, Churchill and his generals called US President Franklin Roosevelt and American generals. The purpose of many of the bunker's separate rooms changed throughout the war, but the facility always included private bedrooms for senior officers and ministers and rooms for typists and telephone switchboard operators. The basement, called the Dock, was located beneath the Cabinet War Rooms. In this extremely uncomfortable place, the staff slept so they would not have to go home under heavy air raids at the end of their shifts. On August 15th, 1945, Japan surrendered, ending the war. The next day, the lights in the map room were simply turned off and the employees left their offices. As a museum, the bunker opened its doors to the public in 1984. In 2003, the museum opened access to other rooms that Churchill, his wife and closest associates used. 2 more years later, it was rebranded and named the Churchill Museum and Cabinet War Rooms. Well, let's continue our way down. As we descend to a depth of 20 meters, 66 feet, let's imagine the following situation. You want to send, let's say, a letter to a person who lives on the other side of town. Today, you'll probably use messages or email to do this. But almost 2 centuries ago, the scheme was more complicated. If you lived in 19th century London, you'd have to write a letter and then place it in a metal capsule, put it in a pipe, and close the door, thus sealing the pipe. A specific mechanism would push the capsule through the pipe with air, and someone on the other side of town would receive your letter. Sounds unusual, right? And for a modern person accustomed to messages and social networks, it's also complicated. But that's roughly how our next destination worked. The London Pneumatic Dispatch Company. It was established in 1859 and was supposed to deliver mail, parcels and light goods around London underground. The system was launched in 1863 and operated for 11 years. The company tested the technology in 1861 with funding of £25,000, roughly the equivalent of $3,936,489 in 2024. At that time, a 413-metre-long pipe was installed. Inside, there was a track of 61 centimetres wide. The capsules in which parcels or letters were placed were fitted with vulcanized rubber flaps to make them airtight. And pushing these capsules down the tube was a 30-horsepower steam engine with a huge fan. These capsules probably must have been pretty light then. You'd think, and you'd be wrong, because some capsules with all the packages could weigh up to 3 metric tons and travel at 60 kilometers an hour. A permanent line was built between Euston Railway Station and the Northwest District Post Office on Evershall Street. This route was approximately half a kilometre long. A capsule carrying up to 35 mail sacks made the short journey between terminals in 1 minute. 13 trips were made daily. The daily operating expenses were £1 4 shillings and 5 pence. Eventually, the company planned to build a network of such lines in London. The next line connected Euston and Holborn. When it was ready in 1865, the company's chairman, the 3rd Duke of Buckingham, squeezed into one of the capsules and took a test ride on it like a train. Subsequently, several more lines were built, albeit with difficulties due to the financial crisis, including from the main post office. However, the system didn't save much time. So, in 1874, the post office abandoned its use. A year later, the company was liquidated. It was reported in the press that the reason was the constant sticking of parcels underground. By the way, the London Pneumatic Mail was not the only one in the world. We already told you about a similar service in our video about underground New York. So let's not stray too far from the mail theme and just hop on a miniature train. Don't be surprised by its size. It's specifically made that way, so watch your head when you get on. We're on the Post Office Railway, 21 metres, 69 feet underground. These ran under London in the 20th century and were designed to carry mail only, not people. This 61 centimetre wide automatic electric underground railroad was opened in 1927 and operated for 76 years, until it closed in 2003. How did it appear? In the early 20th century, Royal Mail staff were looking for a way to speed up deliveries. That's when they turned their attention to Chicago's underground freight train system. And so the idea was born. Planning and work went on for a full 10 years. The Underground Railroad became available for Christmas packages in 1927, and letters began to be delivered through it in February 1928. It was also heavily used later on, running 22 hours a day. There were 8 stations, the largest of which was located under Mount Pleasant. At its peak in the mid-20th century, the system carried out 4 million pieces of mail a day along a 10.5 kilometre underground section at a speed of around 64 kilometres an hour, with terminals at Paddington in the west and Whitechapel in the east. But by the end of the century, mail volume had declined. It was used only at a third of its capacity, and the road became unprofitable. By the early 2000s, only 3 stations remained. According to the Royal Mail, it was 5 times more expensive to use the railroad to transport mail than it would have been to use cars. In 2003, the mail rail was closed and abandoned and many entry points were sealed off. The railroad stood like that for 8 years until a group of enthusiastic researchers called Consolidation Crew illegally infiltrated it in 2011. They published detailed photo and video reports. Thus it became known that the road was still in good condition. Other enthusiasts armed with cameras tried to follow in their footsteps. And then, due to an imminent opening of the Postal Museum, journalists were allowed into the tunnels. And in 2017, Mail Rail opened to the public. The very trains, one of which we boarded at the beginning of our journey, became available for visitors. Their track runs, among other things, under Royal Mail's sorting office in Mount Pleasant. So it's time to leave the mini train and get on the regular London Underground train. And to do that, you have to go down to a depth of 24 meters, 79 feet. Look around you, a symphony of iron and plastic. You knew the London Underground was the first in the world, right? Once upon a time, this form of transportation was desperately needed because the roads were clogged with people, carriages, stagecoaches, and horse-drawn omnibuses. The result was the Metropolitan Railway, the world's first subway system. The idea of an underground railroad connecting the City of London with the city centre was proposed back in the 1830s. Next, permission was obtained and preparatory work was carried out. For this purpose, a short test tunnel was built in the small town of Kibblesworth in 1855. It was used for 2 years in the first subway train development, and later, in 1861, it was filled up. The site was not chosen by chance. Its geological properties were similar to London. The psychological environment surrounding the first subway was quite tense. It was ridiculed in music halls and called the Drain, where the predictions that the tunnel top would collapse and passengers would suffocate from the smoke. An evangelical pastor even accused the railroad company of trying to enter hell. Those who built the subway also had to wade through real obstacles, namely gas, water and sewer pipes. It wasn't an easy task, but the day X came on January the 10th, 1863. The world's first subway station opened. It connected Paddington and Farringdon. 2 trains ran on the new lines. They were, wait a minute, wooden carriages with gas lighting, towed by steam locomotives. A total of 38,000 passengers were carried that day. The subway was a resounding success. People who previously had to spend almost an hour and a half on the road could reach their destination in 20 minutes tops, thanks to the subway. However, in the next 2 days there were unexpected difficulties. Many people wanted to use the subway and the trains couldn't cope. As a result, steam locomotives and cars not designed for subway travel worked on the line. The engines of these steam locomotives created an abundance of smoke in the tunnels. Ventilation in some areas was so imperfect that people in the subway felt ill. But none of this prevented the subway from carrying 9 million passengers in its first year. Over the next 2 years, the line was extended further east into the city to Moorgate and in the other direction to Hammersmith. Other lines were soon added to the growing network and deeper underground tunnels appeared. Gas locomotives were later replaced by electric trains. The first underground electric railroad opened in 1890. Today, the London Underground has 11 lines, 272 stations. Every year, its trains travel 43 million miles. And that's halfway to the sun, no less. About the same level, 24 meters underground, another fascinating place is located. What do you think when you hear the word catacomb? Gloomy labyrinths where decayed human remains are hidden? Well, that's certainly not the case with the Camden catacombs. They were used for another purpose. The Camden Town neighbourhood in northwest London dates back to the late 18th century. It's now home to the street markets and concert venues associated with alternative culture. On average, 250,000 people visit it every week. Walking through Camden Market, few people consider what lies beneath it. And there are the Camden Catacombs, a vast network of underground passages closed to the public. They were built in 1837 by Victorian engineer Robert Stevenson. The catacombs were used as stables for the horses and ponies that worked on the railroads. The horses helped drive the railroad cars back and forth. At one point, there was even a veterinary hospital for the animals in the catacombs. The horse tunnels from the roundhouse to the Regent's Canal provided a safe passage for the horses working at the station in the 19th century. There was also a pool near the catacombs for boats on the Regent's Canal. Later, in 1869, wine importers W&A Gilby moved their business to Camden Goods Station. The catacombs became a great place to store whiskey, wine and gin. Nowadays, most of the underground tunnels have not survived. Those that remain have been closed to the public because of the risk of flooding. Let's go even lower. 36 meters, 118 feet deep to be exact. To get to this depth, you'll need to find a drum-shaped building near the Northern Line. Several such unusual structures can be found near some subway stations. They've been preserved since the Second World War, and that's our next point. What were these buildings for? They were the entrances to the so-called deep shelters. 8 of them were built in the early 1940s to protect the public from bombing. They're located underneath London Underground stations. Each had 2 entrances and could fit up to 8,000 people. Although 10 shelters were originally planned for a total of 100,000 people, each consists of 2 parallel tunnels, 5 meters in diameter and 370 meters long. Together, they constituted a network of underground shelters. The shelters were designed so that after the war they could be connected to form an express subway line. This plan was discussed before the outbreak of hostilities, but it was never realized due to the lack of funding. The shelters were opened as early as 1940 during the Blitz in response to public demand for shelter at London Underground stations, although they were not finally completed until 1942. Today, most of the shelters hold documents, but some were used for a different purpose. For example, the shelter on Clapham Common was used as an underground farm until 2023. The spacious halls were used to grow herbs. The structure on Cheney Street is known as the Eisenhower Center in honor of its role in World War II. The fact is that General Eisenhower used this underground facility as his headquarters during preparations for D-Day. That's the term for the operation to land a naval landing in Normandy. The structure is now used to store documents. One of the entrances to the Stockwell shelter has been decorated and turned into a war memorial. The Camden shelter on Buck Street is decorated with a mural by street artist Nathan Bowen. The shelter at Clapham South is the only one you're likely to be able to look inside. It was originally built as part of a new rail line that was supposed to run between North and South London. The London Transport Museum runs tours there as part of its Hidden London programme. Let us, too, walk past the preserved bunk beds that are still in place. About 8,000 people could have been squeezed into these rows of 3 bunks. However, the shelter was never fully utilised. It was opened in 1944. Several years had passed since the Blitz. Nevertheless, the shelter was helpful to families who'd lost their homes. It was apparently quite crowded. After the war in 1948, Jamaican immigrants who sailed from Jamaica to the UK on the ship Empire Windrush were accommodated here for up to 6 months. Many eventually settled in nearby Brixton. But it's time for us to move on. The next point of our journey is 50 meters, 164 feet underground, and it is a sewer. While we're down this deep underground, let's learn more about this structure. Imagine the 1850s, you're walking along the Thames. You enjoy the view of the river in its pristine state, with no skyscrapers nearby. But do you feel that smell? Yep, it's coming from the river. At this time, 2.5 million people were living in London, And those 2.5 million flushed toilet waste down the storm drain every day. And from there, that waste went, yes, into the Thames. The river was flowing sluggishly instead of draining into the sea. The waste was left there, so the river effectively became an open sewer. But for all the pollution in the Thames, people didn't stop taking water from the river for cooking and drinking. And of course, they got sick. For example, it was during that period that cholera became widespread. In 1853, it killed 15,000 Londoners. Nevertheless, the authorities did nothing about the problem until 1858. That year, due to the hot summer, the Thames began to smell so bad that it became known as the Great Stink. At the time, it was wrongly believed that cholera was transmitted through miasmas. That is, odour. It was an outdated theory that the cause of many epidemics, including the plague, was hidden in the bad air emanating from rotten organic matter. So, because of the foul-smelling Thames, members of Parliament became concerned about their health and decided to commission a new sewerage system. The engineer, Joseph Bazalgette, was put in charge of the construction. Bazalgette decided to build a vast underground sewer system that carried London's waste downstream to the mouth of the Thames, away from the main areas where people lived. The engineer spent 9 years to build 6 interceptor sewers, totaling around 161 kilometres in length. As we've already mentioned, some of London's rivers were also used to create the sewer network. In total, 318 million bricks and 670,000 cubic metres of concrete were needed. All of this wasn't in vain. Building an efficient sewerage system helped to defeat cholera. Typhus also went down. The tunnels are still in good condition thanks to the durable Portland cement. In modern times, there was a need to increase the sewer system capacity. And so the Thames Tideway project was born. And now we're moving through its result, the Super Tunnel, a 25-kilometre long combined sewer. This large tunnel is, for the most part, up to 67 metres underground. But the Lee Tunnel, part of its system, goes down to about 80 metres at Beckton. The tunnel runs under the Thames through the whole of London. Construction was completed in March 2024. Tests will be carried out and the tunnel will be up and running as early as 2025. The cost of the project was £5 billion. Yes, London's fast-growing population has led to the appearance of advanced sewerage systems. But what about the water system? It's at about the same level, 10 to 80 metres, 262 feet underground to be exact. We're at the Thames Water Ring. Before the Thames Water Ring was built, water was mainly supplied through water pipes that were located just below the surface. Most water pipes were weakened by corrosion and couldn't cope with the huge amount of water volume, and the need for drinking water was only increasing. The construction of the ring made it possible to reduce the load on these water pipelines and to maintain them properly. As a result, most of them are still in operation today. By the way, the oldest of these water pipes dates back to 1838. The main part of the Thames Water Ring was constructed in 1988 to 1993. As a result, about 80 kilometres of concrete tunnels were built connecting large water treatment plants in the western part of London, with pumping stations in the central districts with the highest water demand. Building the structure cost about £248 million at the time, which by today's standards equates to about £665 million. Today, this system carries up to 1,300 million litres of water daily. This amount could fill 520 Olympic swimming pools to the brim.
But the secrets of the underground expand far beyond Europe. Now we'll look at a metropolis built on the land of one of the most advanced ancient civilizations. This place is one of the oldest settlements in the North American continent.
people began living here 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. Exactly here on the site of the ancient Lake Texcoco, the capital of the almighty Aztecs, Tenochtitlan rose several centuries ago. Today, this city is home to 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites and over 21 million people. This is Mexico City. The pulsing heart of Mexico, a true city of contrasts, where modern buildings stand side by side with ancient artifacts of past civilizations. Today we'll have an exciting journey through its undergrounds to uncover the hidden secrets beneath the streets of Mexico City. You'll see things that will forever change how you perceive this incredible place. What lies beneath Mexico City? Shall we begin our story underground? At the very top layer of Mexico City, at a depth of 5 to 20 centimeters, 2 to 8 inches, lies the road surface made of asphalt, concrete, or paving stones. This layer's thickness varies depending on the road type. Beneath the asphalt or concrete at a depth of around 40 centimeters, 16 inches, there's a layer of gravel or crushed stone which ensures stability and drainage. Under the road surface foundation, at a depth of up to 50 centimeters, 20 inches, a sand cushion is often laid to level the surface and improve drainage. At a depth of up to 60 centimeters, 24 inches, you'll find communication cables for telephone and internet, unless these wires are not laid in the air, i.e. on utility poles. The same goes for power supply lines, which are connected directly to homes. Some of these lines are laid above ground, but others can be buried at depths of up to 1 meter, 3.3 feet, depending on the line's specifications and safety requirements. Water pipes and gas supply lines run at about the same level, although there might be some slight variations. This layered cake can vary in thickness by several meters, depending on the location, the age of the specific infrastructure, and other conditions. Let's go down further to a depth of 1.5 meters, 5 feet. Here we'll find a mysterious underground structure, cavities shaped like truncated cones. These are 3,000-year-old tombs located beneath Chapultepec Park. The site was discovered by archaeologists from the National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH, in 2023. In 5 of these tombs, scientists found human remains, 4 female and 1 male, all in a crouched position. Because of their inverted conical shape with a truncated top, they're also known as botelon or bell tombs. A total of about a dozen 3,000-year-old tombs were found. But what makes this burial site so unique?
Well, let's start with the fact that Chapultepec Park itself is a place rich in history. It is situated in the center of a natural rock formation.
The Toltecs named the area Grasshopper Hill, which would later be called Chapultepec in Nahuatl, meaning at the Grasshopper Hill. During the Classic period, 200 to 900 AD, the region was inhabited by the Teotihuacan culture.
A bit later, the Tepanecs from Azcapotzalco and the Mexica people settled here. When the Mexica took control of the Valley of Mexico, the hill was considered sacred and used as a burial site for their rulers' ashes. Later, the hill became the site of one of the final major battles between the Mexica and the Spanish conquistadors when the Spanish built Chapultepec Castle in 1785 as a summer retreat for colonial viceroys.
But what makes this burial site unique is that it dates back to the pre-Classic period, which lasted from 2500 BC to 250 AD. How did it manage to remain intact for so long, having gone through such dramatic historical periods? It was actually due to a volcanic eruption.
For us to imagine, this community was living here before the Xitle volcano erupted and the formation of the Pedregal de Coyoacán.
And this subsoil was preserved intact for more than 3,000 years. That's what's fantastic, says excavation coordinator Maria de Lourdes Lopez Camacho. In other words, the volcanic ash seemed to have wrapped this place like a blanket, creating a protective shield that preserved the ancient tombs for millennia. The last major eruption of Hitler occurred around 245 to 315 AD, when it destroyed the city of Quilquico, an important archaeological site in what is now the Tlalpan district. According to Maria de Lourdes Lopez Camacho, the discovery of these tombs indicates the existence of a large settlement in the Lomas de Chapultepec area on the outskirts of the forest during the early and middle preclassic periods, 2500 to 400 BC. On top of that, this is the first time that funerary architecture from the earliest agricultural settlements has been discovered in the area now occupied by the western part of Mexico City, and at such a high altitude too, 2,416 meters above sea level. A bit higher, the archaeological team discovered 3 burials in rectangular stone containers, oriented along the east-west axis. The difference in tomb shapes led them to conclude that the settlement mentioned earlier existed long after the pre-classic period. Archaeologists retrieved various artifacts from the tombs. Some were placed there as burial offerings. All these items were sent to the National Museum of History at Chapultepec Castle for further study. Now let's continue our journey through the underground Mexico City. At around 5 meters, 16 feet below the surface, we encounter ongoing excavations at Templo Mayor, a complex of sacred Aztec structures. Closer to the surface, you can already admire the ruins of the very heart of Tenochtitlan, the ancient capital of the Aztecs. Why is this place called Templo Mayor? This is the Spanish name for the main temple of this lost civilization. The Aztecs themselves called it Hueyteocalli. It's hard to believe that until the 1980s, few people knew of its existence. And as is often the case, it was discovered by chance. In 1978, workers laying electrical cables 2 blocks from the city's central square accidentally uncovered an intricately carved stone monolith. It depicted a dismembered and decapitated woman. They immediately realized that they'd stumbled upon something special, and they surely had. Archaeologists were called in, and they quickly identified the figure on the monolith as the Aztec goddess of Coyolxauhqui. Her name is sometimes translated as painted with bells or bells her cheeks. But what's more interesting is the mythology surrounding her. According to the legend, Coyolxauhqui was the sister of Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec patron god who killed her when she tried to murder their mother. A rather intense family dramatic, but such bloodthirstiness is rather common in ancient belief systems. The discovery of the monolith was just the beginning of a series of remarkable finds that eventually led to the unearthing of Templo Mayor, the main temple of the Aztecs, right in the center of modern Mexico City. Mexico's capital was built on the site of another capital, Tenochtitlan, the heart of the once great Aztec Empire. Templo Mayor held a central sacred place in the Aztec capital. Crowned with twin temples dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, and Xaloc, the god of rain, it was the epicenter of Aztec religion and effectively the center of the universe for this people. It was also the site of state ceremonies, coronations, and countless human sacrifices. The blood of these sacrifices was believed to nourish and appease the 2 great gods to whom the temple was dedicated. Templo Mayor was first built during the reign of Izcuatli from 1427 to 1440 AD. The temple was then enhanced by his successor, Moctezuma I, and later expanded during the reign of Ahuitzotl from 1486 to 1502. These and other rulers used the resources and labor of neighboring states as a tribute to construct a more impressive temple than their predecessors. The construction site was chosen with utmost care as the temple was a stone enhancement of the original shrine that the first settlers of Tenochtitlan built in honor of Huitzilopochtli. Over the years, the temple grew, with new layers being added on top of the old ones. These layers were used to richly bury offerings and treasures. At the peak of the Aztec civilization, Templo Mayor was the most important structure in the heart of the large-scaled area, measuring 365 meters, 1,200 feet on each side. The site could accommodate up to 78 different structures, but Templo Mayor was undoubtedly the tallest and dominated the architectural assembly of the city. The temple itself was a pyramid standing 60 meters, 180 feet tall, with 4 tiers and 2 staircases on the western side leading to the top. The pyramid was aligned along the east-west axis, so standing at the top of the stairs, one could face east and see Mount Tlaloc. On the days of the equinox, the rising sun would pass directly between the 2 shrines on the upper platform. Since the late 1970s, excavations in Mexico City have been almost continuous. The authorities have even decided to demolish several buildings in the area to facilitate these efforts. It was eventually discovered that the pyramid was actually a sequence of pyramids, each built over its smaller predecessor. The original primitive platform dating back to 1390 AD was also uncovered. In the city centre, archaeologists found around 40,000 artifacts, including mirrors made of shiny obsidian, shells of Pacific turtles highly valued by the Aztecs, and precious jade turquoise masks. Each discovery was more astonishing than the last, all attesting to the incredible wealth of the lost empire. The new civilization that came from across the ocean buried the legacy of the Aztecs, buried it in every sense beneath itself. Now it's time to leave this remarkable place, as many more fascinating things are waiting to be discovered on our journey. But first, a bit of background. Ironically, near the Templo Mayor, next to the destroyed main temple of the Aztecs, stands the currently active main temple of the very destroyers themselves, the Metropolitan Cathedral of the Assumption of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary. This cathedral is one of the largest and oldest in colonial America. For symbolic reasons, it was even partially constructed using stones from the demolished Aztec temple dedicated to the goddess of war, Huitzilopochtli. The crypt of the archbishops lies directly below the cathedral, 4 to 5 meters underground. The crypt is located beneath the cathedral's floor under the altar of the kings. Here we find the cenotaph of Juan de Zamaga, the first archbishop of Mexico. For reference, a cenotaph is a monument similar to a tombstone, but located in a place where there are no remains of the deceased. Essentially, a symbolic grave. Atop the cenotaph is a sculpture of the resting archbishop with a stone skull in the Mexican style nearby. It might seem like an odd combination, but it actually makes sense. Zamaga was considered a benefactor of the indigenous people of the Americas because he defended them from the abuses of the Spanish rulers. The skull was included in the composition as a kind of offering. The walls of the cenotaph featured dozens of bronze plaques indicating the burial sites of other former archbishops of Mexico City, including Cardinal Ernesto Carripio y Ahumada. The floor is covered with small marble slabs. These aren't just ordinary slabs, they cover niches containing the remains of other people. There are other crypts and niches under the cathedral where other religious figures are buried. Some of them are located beneath chapels. There are quite many of them, a total of 16 chapels surrounding the cathedral. So there are plenty of underground spaces here, but it's time for us to move on. Once again, at a depth of 5 meters, 16 feet, we can see a subterranean chamber that clearly has nothing to do with the Spanish colonizers. This is clearly an authentic Aztec structure. We're near the Aztec royal crypt located close to the Templo Mayor. But there is a problem. The chamber is flooded with water. How can we explore it? Let's start from the beginning, or rather from 2006. No, actually 1985. Why such a strange timeline? Let's explain. On Thursday, September 19th, 1985 at 7:18 a.m. local time, one of the most devastating earthquakes in history of the Americas struck Mexico City. There were casualties and widespread destruction. Due to severe damage, an old colonial building in the city center had to be demolished as part of recovery efforts. Who could have known that thanks to this demolition, an astonishing discovery would be made 22 years later? The fact is that many Aztec relics cannot be uncovered for a simple reason. As we mentioned, the Spanish built their city directly on top of the Aztec capital. Half a century later, these buildings became valuable historical relics, and no one would consider demolishing them for excavations. Exceptions do happen, but they are extremely rare. However, in 1985, nature took upon itself to destroy one of these buildings. And in 2006, archaeologists discovered something remarkable at the site. First, they found a massive monolith, with a carved image between Argentina and Guatemala streets beside the Templo Mayor at a depth of about 5 meters, 15 feet. The word massive here doesn't do this thing justice. In fact, the monolith measured 417 by 362 centimeters, 164 by 142 inches, was 40 centimeters thick, almost 16 inches, and weighed 12 metric tons. It turned out that beneath this monolith was an entrance to an underground chamber. The passage was filled with water, stones, and mud. The excavations required extreme caution and care, as it was unclear how historically valuable every square inch of the interior might be. They decided to make use of advanced technology by thoroughly scanning the surrounding surface with ground-penetrating radar. Finally, it was found that there were at least 4 chambers underground, and soon the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. The image on the monolith was not just a random Aztec-style carving, but a portrait of Tealtecuhtli, an Aztec deity. She was always depicted as a woman with massive claws and blood streaming from her mouth. The goddess was so terrifying to the Aztecs that they usually buried her images face down. However, this particular image was facing upwards. The key detail was that the goddess held a rabbit with 10 dots on its right paw. Scholars interpreted this as a reference to the 10th year of the rabbit, or 1502 in our calendar. This was a significant year for the Aztecs, as it marked the death of Emperor Ahuizotl. This discovery was shaping up to be a global sensation. All findings suggested that under the long-demolished building, for the first time in history, scientists had found the tomb of an Aztec ruler. Everyone was astonished, as this discovery had almost political significance for Mexico, not to mention cultural. The only thing left was to access the flooded chambers and explore them without causing any damage. But this must be an easy task, right? The most optimistic archaeologists hoped to enter the tomb within the same year. However, for reasons that remain unclear, the work stretched down for decades. Good news finally came in 2019, and even then, it didn't directly involve the presumed tomb, but something that was kind of in that area. Very close to the previous find, archaeologists discovered a stone reservoir with astonishing relics. These included the bones of a jaguar and a young boy, who at the time of his death was around 9 years old. He was dressed to resemble Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war. The jaguar too was donned in warrior clothes. Of course, to a layperson, these artifacts might look like an incomprehensible jumble, but archaeologists were thrilled because they realized what they were dealing with. The boy wore a jade necklace and something resembling a cloak or wings made from hawk bones. On what would have been the jaguar's back, experts found an intricately carved wooden medallion, possibly also dedicated to the god of war. Beneath the bones of the child and the jaguar were the bones of a roseate spoonbill, a bird from the flamingo family, long associated with Aztec warriors and the nobility of Tenochtli clan. Next to these intriguing finds, the sarcophagus contains seashells and coral fragments, which have been brought from the coastal waters of Yucatan and Belize, nearly 1,000 miles away. Researchers believe that the location of this tomb was once part of a circular ritual platform that stood in front of the twin pyramids, which made up what is now referred to as the Templo Mayor. According to reports from people in Cortes' entourage, Aztec priests placed the cremated remains of Aztec emperors on this circular stone platform, along with carefully selected offerings. The combination of factors, the giant burial slab depicting the goddess and the rich secondary sacrificial burials, strongly suggested that the urn containing Emperor Ahuizotl's ashes were somewhere very close, perhaps literally under our feet. By the time the COVID-19 lockdown was implemented, just over 10% of the tomb had been excavated and studied. Currently, the efforts continue with varying intensity. The intriguing question remains, will archaeologists finally discover the resting place of the great Emperor Ahuizotl? We hope to find this out very soon, and with that hope, let's continue our exciting journey. But this time let's descend even deeper, down to about 7 meters, 23 feet into the abandoned legacy of another era. The remains of the former National Ammunition Factory, Fábrica Nacional de Cartuchos, located beneath Chapultepec Park. This site was so neglected that the very existence of these ruins was something of a hypothesis until 2016. That was when these underground galleries were first discovered. It wasn't until 2022 that the most significant findings were made. When monitoring the construction of the Chipatito pedestrian road, which was supposed to connect the first and second sections of Chapultepec Forest, a group of researchers from the National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH, discovered partially decayed ammunition and a newly uncovered chamber measuring 15 square meters, 160 square feet. Remarkably, the structure had multiple levels. Fábrica Nacional de Cartuchos was an ambitious project aimed at reducing Mexico's dependence on American weapons during World War I. Maria Dolores López Camacho, whom you already know, was appointed to lead the team of archaeologists. According to her, this discovery confirms her own hypothesis. The elevation visible in Rosario Castellanos Park, right in the area where the monument to the writer is located, is not a natural formation, but rather a thin layer of soil covering the structural complexes of the National Ammunition Factory. What makes this place even more fascinating is that it represents two distinct areas. Part of the structures include sections of adobe walls that belonged to Casamata, a colonial fort destroyed during the Battle of Molino del Rey against American forces on September 8, 1847. So what eventually happened here, and why did this entire structure end up underground? By the late 1940s, the factories had fallen into despair and all the machinery was dismantled and removed to the powder factory in Santa Fe, Mexico. Only these massive walls and tunnels remained. In the 1950s, this area became part of Chapultepec Forest, and nature quickly took over, covering all the traces of the dramatic events under the soil and vegetation. Should we delve even deeper? At a depth of 10 meters, 33 feet, we find the Rio de la Piedad. Yep, it's an underground river. And it's not the only one in Mexico City. There are two other relatively large underground rivers, Rio Consulado and Rio Churubusco. How did these rivers end up underground? Once they were picturesque streams amid equally picturesque landscapes surrounding a lake. But the rapidly growing metropolis quickly devoured both the lake and the rivers themselves. Here's how it happened. Starting in the 1930s, Mexico City's population experienced explosive growth, reaching 1 million residents. Since then, more and more people have flocked to the city, and by 1950 it faced numerous issues, including overpopulation and flooding, a lack of public services, roads and drainage infrastructure. Additionally, there were losses of agricultural land and health problems due to the improper use of rivers and canals. The authorities undertook projects to address these issues. One of the initiatives involved covered up the bodies of water, which had long ceased to be crystal clear and had turned into reservoirs of wastewater. For years, the tributaries had become centers of infection, used as toilets, garbage dumps and laundries. Between 1954 and 1967, the city undertook efforts that ultimately forced major rivers that once flowed through some parts of the city underground. Rio de la Piedad was the first to be hidden underground, to make way for the first viaduct and to make room for the increasing flow of vehicles. The same happened to the rivers Churubusco, Consulado and Mixcoac, which once flowed into Lake Texcoco. The lake itself had been drained much earlier. Other rivers that disappeared under concrete include San Juan de Dios in the Talpan district, Miramontes, Tacubaya, and San Angel, also known as Rio Chico or Tizapan. One of the last rivers to be encased in concrete pipes was the Los Remedios River. Now, thousands of cars drive over Mexico City's historic rivers every day. Sometimes, romantics propose initiatives to restore the natural state of at least some of the rivers. About 10 years ago, architect Elias Catan proposed a project to revive the Rio de la Piedad. Admittedly, the concept looked very picturesque and appealing, but as we can see, there hasn't been much progress in this direction over the past 10 years. The Rio de la Piedad, like the other mentioned rivers, still looks like this. On this somber note, let's move on even deeper underground, but this time we'll explore as deep as we want to. We're going as deep as 10, 20, even 36 meters, 115 feet. Here lies the deepest point of the second largest subway system in North America, next to New York City's. The grand opening ceremony of the Mexico City Metro took place on June 19, 1967, at the intersection of Chapultepec and Bucareli Avenues. Today, the Mexico City Metro consists of 12 lines with 195 stations. The network stretches over 226 kilometers, 140 miles in total. The metro includes 115 underground stations, 55 surface-level stations, 24 elevated stations, and 1 overhead station, totaling 184 stations within Mexico City itself, with an additional 11 stations located in the state of Mexico. This is a mixed-type metro system. Remarkably, it even includes rubber-tired trains. If someone were to bet us $10 on this, we would have wagered all $100 that such a thing didn't exist and that it was some sort of joke or meme. But it does exist, including right here in Mexico City. So where exactly are we now? We're on the deepest line of the Mexico City Metro, Line 7. As mentioned earlier, its depth reaches up to 36 meters, 118 feet below street level in some places. This line was opened in 1984 and 1985. It has 14 stations and stretches 18 kilometers. Geographically, the line runs from north to south. The Mexico City Metro has seen its share of dramatic stories. Particularly remarkable is what happened to the metro system on the morning of September 19, 1985, when an 8.0 magnitude earthquake struck in Mexico City. Many buildings and streets sustained serious damage, making surface travel challenging, but the metro remained largely unaffected. This was thanks to the forward-thinking engineers who designed the tunnels and stations with rectangular structures instead of arches, making them earthquake-resistant. On the day of the earthquake, the metro still almost completely halted operations, at least in part due to fears of electrical hazards. At the time, there were 101 stations, 32 of which were closed to the public for several weeks following the event. However, Line 4 continued to operate as usual. The metro's construction is also tied to countless archaeological discoveries. In this respect, the Mexico City Metro is a cousin of the Rome Metro, where almost no construction project is completed without excavations. During the construction of the Mexico City Metro, more than 20,000 ancient artifacts from various periods of indigenous history were uncovered, including parts of pyramids, an altar to the Mexican god Iecatl, a sculpture of the goddess Coatlicue, and mammoth remains. The Iecatl altar is now located at Pino Suarez Station between lines 1 and 2, and the National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH, calls it the smallest archaeological site in Mexico. At Zocalo Station, there are 3 large models depicting the area during the Aztec period, the Middle Ages, and later periods. And this isn't the only exhibit in the Mexico City Metro. In fact, there's even an entire museum dedicated to the history and development of the Mexico City Metro. The museum is located at Mixcoac subway station, which lies at the intersection of Line 12 and the deepest Line 7. About half of the exhibits in the Metro Museum are dedicated to the construction of the subway and include many truly impressive hand-drawn architectural sketches, a craft that is slowly becoming extinct in the modern era. There are also numerous pictures of the construction process. A stellar team of architects, including Felix Candela and Rina Lasso, assisted in the planning of the metro system, and examples of their work are also on display here. You'll also see the minimalist design created by Lance Wyman for the station typography. In 1969, instead of advertising posters, the city featured massive electronic billboards displaying neon-toned photographs of Mexico. One of the museum halls showcases fragments of these photos and copies of the original drawings. Another section features images of subway attendants guiding passengers to leather seats during the early years of the subway system. At the end of the museum, there is a permanent exhibition featuring a collection of artworks from the Pascual Cultural Foundation. Where else can we go to further explore underground Mexico City? Is there anything even deeper? Absolutely, and you'll be amazed at just how deep this something goes. We're descending to a depth of 50 meters, 164 feet, and here we'll find the sewage system. It's important to note that the population of Greater Mexico City area exceeds 20 million people. That's more than the entire state of Florida with all its cities and towns. Or half of modern Spain. Yep, half of all Spain living in a single city. So how epic must a sewer system of such a city be? Well, it's exactly as epic as it needs to be. Greater Mexico City is serviced by a unified, combined sewer system that collects municipal, industrial, and stormwater wastewater. Below ground, it comprises 11,900 kilometers, 7,400 miles, of standard and medium-sized pipes, plus an additional 118 kilometers, 73 miles of underground collectors and tunnels. In every home, from each sink, toilet and bathtub in Mexico City, there's a pipe that drains wastewater into a common household pipe. From there, the waste flows into larger pipes. To ensure the sewage flows by itself, all pipes are slightly inclined. That's why the entire system becomes deeper and deeper as the waste flows into increasingly larger pipes. The sewer eventually drains into the largest sewer wells called interceptors. In total, the metropolis has 9 of these structures. From these interceptors, the wastewater flows into the main sewer lines, particularly the central drainage system. Recently, this central artery received an epic upgrade. We find it at a depth of up to 200 meters, 656 feet. It's the gigantic sewer collector known as El Túnel Emisor Oriente, TEO, a giant sewer collector that took 10 years to build and was finally opened in 2019. Without it, the capital city faced serious challenges in handling wastewater and stormwater. It's called the largest sewage project in the world. A consortium of 5 major companies worked on it, and the tunneling was done using state-of-the-art tunnel boring machines. A total of 23.4 billion pesos, $1.4 billion, was invested in the construction of the Eastern Collector. The tunnel stretches for 62.5 kilometers, almost 39 miles. To prevent collapse, it was constructed using a lining with segmented rings made of concrete and steel. Here's where it starts. And here is where it ends. It is expected that this tunnel will finally put an end to the severe flooding that periodically plagues the Valley of Mexico. The first recorded major flood in Mexico City occurred as far back as 1555, after the Spanish conquest of the country. The Spanish attempted to modernize the sewage system built by the Olmecs and the Aztecs, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Subsequent attempts to create an efficient drainage system for Mexico City were made in 1788, 1900, 1962, and 1975. The main issues with all these projects were their relatively short length and low slope angle for natural water drainage. As a result, they had low capacity and quickly silted up. For example, the Great Drainage Canal, which opened in 1900, had a capacity of 80 cubic meters of water per second by 1975. But by 2008, it was down to just 15 cubic meters. During this period, the population of Greater Mexico City grew from 10 million to over 20 million, which significantly exacerbated the sewage problem. Another enormous collector, Emisor Central, which we mentioned earlier, has lost up to 40% of its capacity since its launch in 1975 due to subsidence and reduced slope angle. Based on the past 5 years, the Emisor Oriente tunnel seems to have solved this long-standing problem for Mexico City, at least for now. And finally, let's take a glimpse into the future. A future we all want to believe in. It's quite possible that soon, at a depth of 300 meters, 984 feet below ground in Mexico City, you'll find an inverted skyscraper, aptly named by its creators as the Earth Scraper. Yep, it's exactly what it sounds like, a massive underground building, structure. It's hard to find a word to adequately put it. This architectural, engineering, infrastructural, and urbanistic project is only comparable in scale to the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Proposed by the Mexican architectural firm BNKR Arquitectura, it offers a radically new approach to addressing the challenges of overpopulation and limited space in a metropolis. The Earth Scraper is envisioned as an upside-down pyramid that descends deep into the earth. The upper part will be at ground level and will gradually narrow down as it goes deeper. At ground level, the area of the structure will be around 24,000 square meters, 258,000 square feet, equivalent to Mexico City's main square, Plaza de la Constitución, or Zócalo. The Earth Scraper will include residential and commercial spaces, creating a unique underground environment. A significant part of the building will naturally be allocated for offices and retail spaces. The plan also includes the creation of museums, exhibition halls, and cultural centres. The central atrium of the pyramid will be equipped with a glass dome providing ventilation and allowing natural light to enter. This will help reduce electricity consumption and create comfortable living and working conditions. The project incorporates the use of renewable energy sources such as solar panels and energy recovery systems. This innovative solution is designed for megacities facing issues of overpopulation and limited space. If successfully implemented, it could serve as a model for other cities around the world seeking sustainable and creative ways to develop urban environments. Let's hope this vision will become a reality. And while new underground projects are being developed here, we'll explore a city long regarded as a symbol of progress in this field.
This is a city of towering skyscrapers, the cultural and financial heart of Canada. Nearly 3 million people live here, representing 230 nationalities who speak over 180 dialects and languages. Every year, millions of tourists visit the city to experience all its diversity. But all of this is just the surface that's visible above ground. Beneath the bustling streets lies something far more mysterious, an entire underground world. In some places, it's vital to millions of people. In others, it's forgotten and abandoned. And in certain areas, it's downright eerie. This is Toronto, one of the most rapidly evolving metropolitan cities in North America. And today you'll find out, how did Toronto end up with a haunted medieval-style castle? Why did the patients of an old psychiatric hospital dig a tunnel underneath it? How can digging a simple hole cause an entire city to panic? Who benefits from keeping ancient burial sites a secret? What lies beneath Toronto? Our journey beneath Toronto starts right at the surface. At an average depth of up to 15 centimetres, 6 inches, lies the topmost layer of road surfacing: asphalt, paving stones or concrete. Up to 35 centimetres, 13 inches deep, you'll find the concrete road base. Up to 55 centimetres, 21 inches deep, there's the sub-base made of crushed stone, gravel, or a sand and gravel mix. It serves as an absorber, provides drainage for water seepage, and forms the foundation of the concrete layer. Around this depth, you might already find telecommunications and electrical cables connected to buildings. It's also roughly the minimum depth of laying gas pipes. Up to 75 centimetres, 30 inches deep, there's a base layer of fine gravel or sand. Its purpose is to create a smooth and stable base for the upper layers and to facilitate water drainage. At 1.8 metres, about 6 feet, you'll reach the minimum depth of water pipes, which is quite deep compared to southern countries, as the frost line here is lower. From this point on, if we keep digging, we might come across not just common water pipes, but something much more peculiar and even eerie. On January the 5th, 2024, a construction crew was working on a water pipe section on Withrow Avenue near the Greektown neighbourhood. Everything was going according to plan until the workers suddenly hit something unusual in the ground. It quickly became clear that these were bones, human bones. What could this be? The site of a gruesome crime or a new archaeological sensation? In fact, at a depth of about 2 to 3 metres, 6 to 10 feet, the workers had found an indigenous burial site, and it's around 700 years old. This land was once inhabited by the Wendat people, Huron-Wendat Nation, and the bones apparently belonged to some of them. What's interesting about this sensation is that it's not a sensation at all, because there seem to be many such places under Toronto. The story began back in 1886 when another burial site was accidentally uncovered in nearly the same location. It was an ossuary, a communal grave where not bodies but the bones of the deceased were placed after the flesh had decayed in other burial sites.
David Boyle, regarded as Canada's first professional archaeologist, excavated ancient tools, pottery, and between 30 and 400 human remains at that time. Perhaps the most fascinating find was a nearly 5,000-year-old spearhead. This place was named the Withrow Archaeological Site. Back then, scientists hadn't done a thorough job of preserving the remains, and so many of them were lost. Nearly 150 years of urban development erased most of the archaeological evidence of indigenous presence in the area. And now the discovery, just 10 meters 30 feet from a plaque marking the site of those 19th century excavations, has brought back these memories. Recently, such discoveries have become increasingly frequent. Forensic anthropologist Greg Olson, who officially confirmed the ancient origins of the newly found burial site, made a rather striking statement about this trend. There seems to be a run on them. This is my 5th confirmation of a native burial site in the Toronto area in the last 4 months. However, it's long been known that there are many such burial sites beneath Toronto. Take Tabor Hill, for example, one of the most well-known Wendat burial sites discovered in Scarborough in the 1950s. About 470 remains were found here. Today, a monument stands at the site, honouring native peoples and their culture. Or consider High Park with its unmarked graves. The exact number and origins of the remains are still under investigation, but the discovery made in 2021 was quite significant. Or the Sand Hill Burial Grounds. This ancient burial site once covered a vast area. Today, much of it has been built over and little remains of the original burials. Archaeologist Greg Olson suggests that there are likely far more such burial sites under modern Toronto, but their discovery would be unwelcome news for many. Since the homeowners must cover the costs of archaeological assessments and restorations, they're not eager to publicise such finds.
One can only guess how many graves of indigenous peoples have been accidentally found but hidden from authorities.
So if someone makes a grim comment that Toronto is built on human bones, it wouldn't be much of an exaggeration. And although these burial sites may seem like harbingers of a real underground realm of the dead, if we dig a few meters deeper, we'll discover a world teeming with life. Because there is another bustling city under Toronto, and this is not much of an exaggeration. At a depth of approximately 3 to 6 meters, 10 to 20 feet, lies the underground part of the famous Path. A network of pedestrian walkways connecting more than 70 office towers in downtown Toronto, totaling about 30 kilometers, 19 miles of tunnels. Path has been included in the Guinness Book of Records as the largest underground shopping complex in the world, with around 370,000 square meters, 4 million square feet of retail space. 6 subway stations, 3 major department stores, 9 hotels, and Toronto's busiest transit hub, Union Station, are accessible through Path. This maze connects Toronto's popular attractions, including the Hockey Hall of Fame, Roy Thomson Hall, Scotiabank Arena, and CF Toronto Eaton Centre. Even Toronto City Hall and Metro Hall are connected via Path. You can literally walk through Path from the waterfront to downtown Yonge, and from the entertainment district to Yonge Street. But really, one could wander here for a long time. Not even all the locals know every nook and cranny of this labyrinth, and Toronto visitors are often seriously overwhelmed by its size, fearing they might get lost. Approximately 200,000 people pass through these streets every day, stopping here and there. And there are plenty of places to spend time at. Around 1,200 stores, salons, restaurants, and other useful or interesting spots. However, it's not just the shops and restaurants that are worth your attention in this underground city. There are also some Easter eggs to be found. For example, the Eaton Centre used to be connected to the Bay department store south of Queen Station by a bridge. But in 2017, it was replaced by a futuristic, winding, spiralling walkway designed by Wilkinson Eyre. It seems the architects were inspired by the James Bond film saga. If you enter the maze through Scotia Plaza, you'll be greeted by the astonishing wall garden. The plants are attached to a biodegradable material, and water gently flows behind it. The lights dim at night, imitating a natural environment. In the underground section of the Fairmont Royal York Hotel, which is also connected to Perth, there is an entire photo exhibition featuring famous guests of the hotel. Among them are political figures and celebrities, and former presidents. In short, there is plenty to see. However, it's worth mentioning that Perth encompasses far from all the tunnels in Toronto. If we dig deeper, both figuratively and literally, we'll find that the city is full of underground tunnels that run at depths ranging from 2 to 10 meters, 6 to 32 feet. And now, let's explore some of the most impressive ones. What comes to mind when you hear the word castle? Perhaps romantic fortresses in England or France? You probably wouldn't picture a building in the heart of one of Canada's most modern cities. Nevertheless, Toronto has its very own castle called Casa Loma. The name roughly translates to House on the Hill. However, as it's often the case, the most intriguing part is hidden underground. Casa Loma was built in the early 20th century by Sir Henry Pellat, a man of immense wealth and ambition. These personal traits drove him to construct a full neo-Gothic castle. But he didn't stop there. Now the house not only boasts old-world-style interiors, but also a long underground tunnel. The passage connects the main castle building to the stables and conservatories located across the road. War and the subsequent economic downturn took a toll on Sir Pellat's financial standing. By 1923, he was forced to auction off his castle and move to his farm. You might think, well, it's pompous, cool, and has an interesting story behind it. But what makes it so special? This is where it gets really interesting. The tunnel stretches for 240 meters, 787 feet, a decent length for a short walk. However, many of those who dared to walk there describe the place as eerie, especially after Sir Pellat's death. Rumours have it that Casa Loma is haunted by the spirits of former servants and even Sir Pellat himself. Given the Gothic architecture and the castle's nearly century-old history, it's easy to see why Casa Loma is shrouded in mysticism. Today, the tunnels of Casa Loma are open for guided tours, with an appropriately atmospheric setting created. Yet some visitors and staff still claim to have felt the touch of invisible hands or seen shadows sliding through the dark tunnels. After walking through the eerie tunnels of Casa Loma, it's hard to imagine that even darker underground dungeons are hidden somewhere beneath Toronto, ones that lack all the modern-day theatrics. But they exist. We are now at Lakeshore, beneath the old psychiatric hospital. Here lies a perfect setting for the scariest of legends and myths, right? In 1889, the Mimico Asylum was established on the site of the provincial farm. Its cottage system was designed to create an institution that felt less like a grim psychiatric hospital and more like a sanatorium. Most of the buildings were constructed by the patients themselves, as productive work was considered therapeutic. They also tended to the gardens and farms on the premises. And yes, the patients were the ones who dug the tunnel system beneath the cottages. No one was trying to escape that way. The tunnels served very practical purposes, transporting supplies, moving patients, and facilitating the movement of hospital staff. This was particularly convenient during the harsh Canadian winters. The asylum's name changed several times before it became the Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital in 1964. Ultimately, the hospital closed in 1979. In 1991, Humber College signed a 99-year lease and renovated the buildings for its campus. But the tunnels have acquired their own eerie reputation among the public. One can't help but imagine narrow, damp corridors with low arches, dimly lit by faint lamps. And of course, ghosts. They're an absolute must. Rumours that ghosts of former patients were seen in the tunnel spread shortly after the hospital closed, and since then, the place has been steeped in urban legends. These legends are fueled by the fact that the college administration is reluctant to allow outsiders into the tunnels. However, some of them are still accessible. The college occasionally permits tours through the Lakeshore Interpretive Centre. the tunnels don't look all that scary now. Or maybe they don't show us everything. Alright, the dungeons of castles and psychiatric hospitals practically beg to be part of urban lore, while it's skeptics' job to snort derisively at such legends. But there are places beneath Toronto whose origins remain unknown to this day. And these places no longer exist, but they definitely did once. Roy Thompson Hall is a famous concert venue and a true architectural gem of Toronto. During its construction, while laying the foundation, workers stumbled upon a strange underground wall that shouldn't have been there. Behind it was a small room measuring about 3 meters, 10 feet on each side. Inside were a chair and table, 2 mugs and a locked safe, which soon disappeared. There's almost no evidence left, only a newspaper clipping and accounts of eyewitnesses. Around the same time, a tunnel was discovered under Wellington Street, which was soon filled in. The tunnel and room might be linked to past uses of the site under Roy Thompson Hall, but this mystery will likely remain unsolved. Neither will be able to access the tunnel. However, there is one tunnel under Toronto anyone could enter until recently, but it's now off limits. And why did it become forbidden? The reason is quite simple. This pedestrian tunnel runs from the westbound streetcar stop at Queen's Park Station. It has been here for quite some time. Built in 1968, 5 years after the opening of the University subway line, it was designed to connect the concourse level of the station to the Frost building. Access to this tunnel is now only allowed with a valid pass or a visitor badge. A special OPP, Ontario Provincial Police Constable, guards the entrance. Such security measures are well justified as the tunnel extends far beyond the Frost building. From there, it leads to the MacDonald block and then to the Ontario Legislature. Moreover, the Frost building itself has some major offices, including the Ontario Ministry of Finance and the Treasury Board Secretariat. So given today's security concerns, it would be strange if such a massive tunnel leading from a regular subway station remained a security loophole. It's okay, no biggie. After all, if you can't access a tunnel, you're not going to dig one of your own out of spite, are you? In early 2015, a conservation officer noticed a large pile of dirt near the RyvShow Centre, just south of York University. Curious to find out what this suspicious man-made landform was, he discovered a ladder leading down to a 3-meter, 10-foot deep pit, concealed under a piece of wood. Without hesitation, the man called the police. When they arrived and began investigating the site, not only did they not solve the mystery, it became even more inexplicable. Because down below, they didn't just find a pit, but a 10-meter, 33-foot tunnel, about 2 meters, 6 feet high. It had been meticulously constructed, complete with a pulley system to remove soil as the tunnel was dug. The walls were even lined with plywood and reinforced with wooden beams. One of the most intriguing finds was a strange artifact: wooden rosary beads hanging on a nail on the wall, with a Remembrance Day poppy attached to them. The tunnel's proximity to the RyvShow Centre, which was set to host tennis events during the Pan American Games that same year, raised security concerns. However, as Toronto Deputy Police Chief Mark Saunders later explained, there's no criminal offence in digging a hole. The key word here is later, as he gave this explanation after the tunnel's mystery was uncovered. But for a while, there was a real alarm. The story made the news, several reports were filmed, and the whole story came across as quite unsettling. The police's general conclusion was that this clearly wasn't done by amateurs, and they were right. It turned out to be Elton MacDonald, a 20-year-old construction worker who'd built the tunnel over a year and a half. The project was the culmination of his long-term passion. Since childhood, MacDonald had built and then filled in many smaller tunnels. When he discovered the densely wooded area near York University, he envisioned the tunnel of his dreams. Later, in an interview, he would share a touching story of how, from a young age, he wanted to build himself a refuge where he could hide from the elements or simply isolate himself from not so pleasant neighbours. And what about the mysterious rosary? It was a gift from his sister which he used as a protective charm.
Seeing his creation on the news, MacDonald was terrified, thinking the police might come for him. In the end, he faced $800 fine.
And we don't have to go far to explore yet another tunnel system in Toronto. It is right here, beneath the university buildings. The tunnel systems at York University have played a crucial role in connecting students with the campus throughout its history. But it's hard to come by reliable information about them. It's known that several utility tunnels crisscross the campus. They contain a steam pipeline. Hot steam travels from a central boiler to all campus buildings, providing central heating. But the tunnels are used for more than just utility purposes. The university's 1963 master plan included convenient walkways for students between concrete buildings, taking into account the harsh Canadian winters. A small section of this utility route was transformed into a pedestrian tunnel system, connecting the Petrie Science Building and the Stacey Science Library. By 1969, the tunnel between the Murray Ross Building and the Central Square was under construction, and by 1972, there was a passage from College Complex 1 to Stedman Lecture Hall. However, in the 1990s, safety concerns began to arise regarding the tunnels. From 2002 to 2007, the tunnels between Stedman and College Complex 1 were closed due to frequent incidents. Since then, photos and videos from this site have become so rare that it almost feels like we're talking about a military factory, rather than the basements of a regular educational institution. Speaking of underground military factories, this is no mere metaphor. Of course, we're no longer talking about York University or the present day. Instead, we're discussing the late 1930s and early 1940s during World War II, when Canada joined the anti-Hitler coalition and declared war on Nazi Germany. In an incredibly short time frame, even by modern standards, General Engineering Company built a massive munitions factory. On a 225-acre, 91-hectare site in what was then the village of Scarborough, 172 buildings were erected in just 7 months. All made of wood. Doesn't seem to fit with explosive and flammable materials, does it? But those were only change houses. The actual production took place underground. Located south of Eglinton Avenue and North Hymas Road, between Warden Avenue and Birchmont Road, this top-secret factory produced over 256 million munitions for Allied forces. Its workforce of 21,000 people consisted mostly of women. The tunnels, which house power lines, water supplies, steam and compressed air, as well as transformer storage and distribution rooms, extended southeast from Eglinton and Warden. The factory operated 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. Placing this infrastructure underground ensured that production wouldn't stop if an explosion occurred in one of the workshops. Knowing that working women often had to juggle job responsibilities with childcare, GECO provided on-site daycare for the children of its employees. In essence, the factory was a mini-city, complete with a hospital, 2 fire stations and a cafeteria that served 1,100 meals every 30 minutes. After all, they had to feed over 20,000 people. Is there anything left today of this factory city and its underground facilities? The above-ground change houses were originally designed to last only 5 years. It was as if someone up there knew approximately when the war would end. If you walk or drive around the area now, bordered by Warden Avenue to the west, Eglinton Avenue to the north, Synod Road to the east and Hymas Road to the south, you'll see the low silhouettes of around 20 original GECO buildings, some of which have miraculously remained unchanged since those dramatic times. The underground tunnels have mostly been destroyed or intentionally filled in, with only archival photos remaining. Today, only a few enthusiasts are trying to preserve at least some of the tunnels as part of historical heritage. Like many major cities, Toronto had several rivers and streams that were buried underground during urbanization. They're now enclosed in concrete or brick culverts at depths of up to 10 meters, 33 feet. Here are a few of the most notable examples. Of all the small rivers that once flowed through early Toronto, Garrison Creek was one of the shortest, about 7.7 kilometers, 4.8 miles, but also the most challenging to navigate. Its winding course and deep ravines posed a significant obstacle to the city's expansion, and sturdy bridges were built over it at Dundas and Harwood streets. These bridges are still there, only now they're also underground, like the river itself. Starting in the 1870s, the creek was diverted into an underground sewer beneath the city streets, and its original course was filled in. By 1920, it had been completely redirected into the sewer system. The route of Garrison Creek is marked by several interesting landmarks. In 2013, particularly heavy rainstorms caused the storm sewers to flood, and Garrison Creek briefly re-emerged. Another hidden stream is Taddle Creek. For a while, it was even referred to as the Little Don River, though it never quite compared to the Big Don. Its geographical legacy is not as notable as Garrison Creek's, but it was quite picturesque. The creek once flowed through what is now the University of Toronto and Yorkville areas. It even formed a small pond near Hart House Circle, which can be seen on old university maps. You can trace its old path by the greenery in Queen's Park, a strange protrusion in the southwest corner of Queen's Park Crescent, and the gentle slope of Parliament Street north of Kings Street marks the limits of the river's preserved landscape. This picturesque pedestrian trail, known as Philosopher's Walk, follows the ravine created by the creek, stretching from the Royal Ontario Museum to Trinity College. By the mid-19th century, Taddle Creek was also buried in a sewer culvert for the same reason as Garrison Creek. Here's another interesting spot. The steep slopes of the Rosedale Ravine had to come from somewhere, right? Something must have carved them out. Yep, and it was yet another river. It flowed southwest through the central and northwest parts of Toronto and into the Don River. This river was formed by several smaller streams, almost creeks, that converged near Cedar Vale Park and eventually eroded near Northheimer Ravine. Today, Castle Frank Brook runs beneath St Clair West Station, briefly reappears in Sir Winston Churchill's Park, and then disappears again into the sewer, which carries it under Rosedale Valley Road into the Don River opposite Riverdale Park. Before we dive deeper into underground Toronto, let's take a look at another little river. It was quite modest, so much so that it didn't even have an official name. It was called Ashbridges Creek, after the family of early landowners in the area. The creek originated from two branches near today's Monarch Park, flowing under the railroad tracks and down Woodfield Road, where it can still be heard today, though now in the sewer system. Today, Ashbridges Creek flows into the Mid-Toronto Sewer Collector on Gerrard Street, and ends its journey at the Ashbridges Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant. Parts of the fence that the Ashbridge family built along the creek to keep their livestock from contaminating it still stand near Craven Road. While Toronto's underground rivers mostly tell stories of the past, the subway system, which runs at depths of up to 30 meters, 100 feet, represents a very present reality. The construction of Toronto's subway began in 1949, and the underground system officially opened in 1954. Since then, it's expanded in 4 directions. The tunnels and stations lie at various depths. The Line 2, Bloor-Darnford, which connects the west and the east sides of the city, runs mostly close to the surface. The same is true for Line 1 from St Clair to Eglinton. The tunnels are laid at a depth of around 6 to 8 meters, 20 to 26 feet. And if you listen closely, you can feel the vibration of the trains passing beneath you. But some stations and entire lines are located 20 to 30 meters, 60 to 100 feet underground. This difference in depth is related to the landscape features and the need to avoid underground rivers and bedrock that would complicate construction. Toronto's subway system is a complex engineering structure. Stations are equipped with powerful ventilation systems to provide a constant flow of fresh air. Additionally, the subway is fitted with a network of pumps to remove groundwater that can seep through tunnel walls, especially in areas with natural aquifers. This has been a real problem, particularly during the construction of new lines. Back in the 1960s, when Line 2, Bloor-Darnford, was being built, the workers faced a significant challenge. Not just small underground streams, but entire underground rivers. Solving this problem was an engineering feat. Builders created special drainage systems that allowed the project to be completed safely. Toronto's subway tunnels continue to expand.
In 2017, the TYSSE, Toronto-York Spadina subway extension, was opened, extending Line 1 beyond the city limits into the York region.
This extension includes Highway 407 station, one of the deepest stations in the entire system, located at a depth of 23 meters, 75 feet. That's the equivalent of a 10-story building buried underground. These underground mazes also have their own ghosts, figuratively speaking. These are abandoned stations that never became a part of the transportation network. The most famous of these is Lower Bay, located right beneath Bay Station on Line 2, Bloor-Dartmouth. The station was operational for a few months in 1966 when they were testing the possibility of transferring between lines. However, the project proved too complex and impractical, so the station was closed. Today, Lower Bay is used as a filming location for movies and TV shows. Thanks to its underground vibe, it's perfect for shooting scenes involving subways and much more. While the station no longer serves thousands of commuters a day, it's not entirely abandoned. The same can't be said about another station, one that's rarely talked about and not quite a subway station. It is something else. At one time, Toronto's subway wasn't the only project addressing the growing downtown traffic problem. One of the proposals for easy traffic jams was a project for underground streetcar tunnels. The idea was to run streetcars underground in the busiest areas, particularly along Queen Street, to speed up passenger travel during rush hour. A key element of this system was an underground station planned beneath Queen Station on Line 1, Yonge University. Construction of the tunnels began in the 1950s and some of them were completed. Tunnels were dug under Queen Street along with streetcar approaches. However, the project had technical and financial issues, especially due to water flows and dense construction in the area. In 1960, the underground streetcar system was abandoned in favor of expanding the subway. Some tunnels were deserted and Lower Queen was sealed behind a metal door in the walkway between subway tracks. Inside, it's damp, dirty, and unexpectedly warm. All kinds of rusting items, such as discarded escalator steps, litter the floor. Down uneven stairways, there's an empty main section of the station, bathed in neon light. At least the lighting still works. Water drips from the ceiling, and every few minutes a train rushes by overhead on the busy Yonge line. Thus, streetcars continue to run only on the surface, and no one has implemented the idea of moving them underground in key segments. That was until the Eglinton Crosstown LRT project began. This is a large-scale light rail transit project in Toronto that will become part of the city's public transportation system. The line runs along Eglinton Avenue with a total length of 19 kilometers, nearly 12 miles, and 25 stations, 10 of which will be underground. And not just underground. Some sections are so deep they can compete with the subway. For instance, Science Centre Station is located about 30 meters, 100 feet below the ground. This station is being built deeper than others due to the complex terrain of the Don River area. Technically, it's a super modern streetcar, hence the name LRT, which stands for Light Rail Transit. However, this line will be so important that it's already officially considered the fifth line of the subway. Do you think that's the deepest point? Let's go even deeper. Here at depths of up to 50 meters, 170 feet, runs Toronto's sewer system. Its oldest parts are a true historical treasure, though it doesn't look as attractive as ancient buildings or bridges. These brick tunnels are hidden beneath the streets of the historic downtown. While many sections have been modernized, some old parts remain intact and are still functional. Today, the system is a complex network of tunnels, wells, and pump stations, divided into two parts. One for wastewater and one for stormwater. The former collects and diverts domestic and industrial wastewater, which then goes to treatment plants. The stormwater system, on the other hand, is designed to collect rainwater from streets and sidewalks to prevent flooding. The principle is simple. Water enters the sewer collectors through numerous inlets, grates on the ground, and moves by gravity down sloped tunnels towards the treatment plants. In recent decades, Toronto has significantly upgraded its stormwater system. The massive underground reservoirs and tunnels used to collect rainwater are particularly impressive. Just think about it. In some parts of the city, such as under Lakeshore Boulevard, there are shafts of over 50 meters, 170 feet deep. That's like a 15-story building, but underground. They look like real underground skyscrapers, only turned inside out. Standing at the edge, you can't help but feel your stomach tighten as you gaze into the dizzying abyss with smooth vertical walls. These shafts can hold enormous volumes of water to prevent city flooding during heavy rains. On days when it pours, the system works at full capacity. Stormwater fills these shafts and then it's slowly channeled through tunnels to relieve the streets and prevent natural disasters. In the Western Beaches area, there are 3 such huge wells connected by a 3.7 kilometer, 2.3 mile tunnel. The total storage capacity is 85,000 cubic meters, over 22 million gallons, which is nearly 35 Olympic-sized swimming pools. But despite their massive size, during a heavy downpour, each of these reservoirs can fill up in just 20 minutes. Where does all this water go next? Naturally, it's drained from the shafts through the largest tunnels to water treatment plants. However, the treatment capacity gradually decreases due to various technical and natural reasons, and the city's growing population continuously increases the volume of wastewater. To address this issue, the city authorities have developed a major infrastructure project, the Don River and Central Waterfront Tunnel Project. This will be a massive tunnel over 6 meters, 20 feet wide, big enough for a truck to easily drive through. But instead of vehicles, this tunnel will carry wastewater collected from nearly the entire city. In fact, the project is already in its final stages. It's scheduled to begin its operations by the end of 2024. And believe it or not, this is still not the deepest part of Toronto's sewer system. How so? What could be deeper than a massive tunnel that's still under construction? We'll go back to that something at the end of the video because it goes much deeper. But for now, let's go even deeper. This time, not underground, but underwater, specifically to the very bottom of Lake Ontario. So what will we find here? At a depth of 83 meters, 272 feet, we'll see one of Toronto's most impressive infrastructure projects, Deep Lake Water Cooling, DLWC. This is the largest system of its kind constructed and operated by Enwave. The system consists of a network of tunnels at the bottom of Lake Ontario, which draws cold water from its depths and transports it to the city to cool buildings. The water at the bottom of the lake is extremely cold, only 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit, approximately the temperature inside a refrigerator. This technological approach significantly reduces energy consumption for air conditioning and lowers carbon dioxide emissions. It's one of the best engineering solutions for a sustainable urban development, providing green cooling to hospitals, data centers, campuses, and various buildings. But this is not yet the deepest place beneath Toronto that Canadian engineers and builders have reached. There's something else, not at the bottom of Lake Ontario, but beneath it. At a depth of 85 meters, 279 feet from the surface, massive trenches were dug to lay pipes for the Asbridges Bay Treatment Plant Outfall Tunnel project. The pipes themselves are huge, over 6 meters, 20 feet in diameter. Plus, they're evenly equipped with short vertical pipes, about 1 meter, 3 feet in diameter, known as risers. These risers discharge the treated wastewater into Lake Ontario. After starting its journey in the city, the sewage is treated and here it's released into the lake, now as regular water. And so our journey ends here.
But only in North America. We're heading back to Europe again. Here we'll find underground spaces that reflect the turbulent history of the 20th century, full of contradictions and turning points.
A city that has survived everything. Empires rose and fell here. Its streets were once battlefields. It burned in a fiery war and lay in ruins. And then it was divided by a 155-kilometer-long wall that tore apart not just the city, but the lives of its people. And yet after all this, it hasn't just survived. It's become different. Today it's home to nearly 4 million people and stands as one of the most free-spirited places on Earth. A city of art, music and nightlife. Legendary techno clubs that pulse until dawn. Street art where creativity knows no boundaries. And over 1,700 bridges. More than in Venice. Now they symbolize unity. This is Berlin. But all this is just at the surface. Another Berlin is hidden beneath the city. A network of old bunkers, tunnels, abandoned subways and underground rivers. All of this was a silent witness of its dark past. And today we'll go down there, into the depths of underground Berlin. Let's see what secrets this city holds beneath our feet. What lies beneath Berlin? The asphalt you walk on daily is just the tip of the iceberg. How many layers do you think it takes to support tons of cars, people, and even buildings? The first layer is usually 2 to 6 inches. It may seem little, but it's like a real fortress. Underneath the asphalt lies a layer of gravel or crushed stone, about 16 inches deep. Major roads are built even more solidly. Here, concrete serves as the base. Even deeper, up to 20 inches, there's a sand cushion. In Berlin, this layer is especially important. Think of the sand as a massive shock absorber. Without it, Berlin's roads would literally bulge like dough in an oven during winter and tear apart like ice on a river in spring. But this sand cushion keeps things together. Deeper still, at about 24 inches, run communication wires, telephone lines and internet cables. Power cables are buried even deeper, up to 3.3 feet. The more powerful the cable, the deeper it's buried. And finally, the most vital utilities. Water and gas pipes are laid at depths ranging from 2.6 to 5 feet. Depending on safety standards, gas pipelines may be laid even deeper, even at such a shallow depth as far down as 16 feet. Berlin's modern infrastructure coexists with something unusual: archaeological excavation sites. The most iconic location is under Molkenmarkt Square, right in the heart of Germany's capital. Here, archaeologists have uncovered 600,000 artifacts during the excavations. But the most astonishing find was a real samurai sword, a wakizashi. Just think about it. A samurai sword in Berlin. Restoration artists discovered unique motifs of the Japanese deity of fortune, Jakokuten, engraved on it. The sword's hilt dates back to the Edo period, around the 17th century. How did it end up here? One theory suggests that the sword was a gift from Japanese delegations who visited Berlin in the 19th century, around the time Japan was opening up to the world. Real pieces of the past were actually being unearthed here. For example, a 13th century street paved with wooden planks was found here. Remarkably, these wooden planks lay underground for 800 years and are still intact. Imagine if your asphalt street were made of boards that survived 800 years. That's longer than the entire history of the USA. Such roads have rarely been preserved in Germany for obvious reasons. Wood isn't particularly durable for such uses. But this road got lucky. In the 14th or 15th century, it was upgraded. Stone paving was laid on top of the wooden planks. However, the wooden layer was not dismantled. Instead, it was effectively sealed in the nearly oxygen-free, very moist environment. With the result, this road lay undisturbed beneath the ground for nearly 800 years, waiting for its triumphant rediscovery. Sadly though, it won't remain there for long. Having survived underground for 8 centuries, it will soon make way for modern infrastructure, gas lines, electricity, and the construction of a new neighborhood. The oldest street in Berlin will soon be dismantled, but its fragments may find their way to a museum. So in a sense, it will live on, just in a different place. But archaeological finds are not the only things you can uncover at a depth of 16 feet in Berlin. There's also a place that people have long avoided mentioning: Hitler's bunker, known as the Führer bunker. literally the last stronghold of the Nazi leadership, located beneath the garden of the Reich Chancellery. Here, Adolf Hitler spent his final days. If the walls could talk, they'd tell us of the tense meetings, panic and despair that filled the air in these rooms. We often imagine bunkers as small rooms equipped with basic necessities, but the Führerbunker was massive. It was a complex structure with 30 rooms connected by narrow corridors. The ceiling alone was almost 10 feet thick, while the walls were even thicker, about 13 feet. Imagine filling the entire height of a standard apartment with concrete, and that still wouldn't be enough. Such reinforcement could withstand direct bomb impacts. Inside, there were all the amenities needed: a power station, ventilation system, and water supply. It was literally designed for total isolation from the outside world. But why do we say was? What happened to the most fortified bunker in mid-20th century Germany? After Germany's capitulation, the Soviet Union made it a priority to destroy any evidence of the Nazi regime's existence. Both buildings of the Reich Chancellery were demolished by occupying forces between 1945 and 1949. The bunker initially survived in a partially flooded state. In December 1947, Soviet forces attempted to demolish it but only managed to destroy interior partitions. In 1959, East German authorities began consistently dismantling the remnants of the Reich Chancellery and the bunker. The Berlin Wall was later constructed near this site, leaving it neglected until 1988 to 1989. To prevent the location from becoming a landmark, the area was built over. Today, the site of the bunker's emergency exit into the garden is just a regular parking lot. Thus ends the story of the last refuge of the bloodiest dictator in history. But what awaits us here next? The deeper we go, the further we delve into the dark history of the 20th century. At a depth of 20 feet, we find the famous Spy Tunnel. You're about to learn why it's called Spy and what makes it so well known. During the Cold War, Berlin was divided by the infamous wall, which split the city into western and eastern parts. The eastern part was under the control of the German Democratic Republic, GDR, a part of Germany controlled by the USSR. It was a real border with barbed wire, watchtowers, and soldiers who shot at those trying to flee from East Berlin to the west. In the midst of the Cold War, divided Berlin became the stage for one of the most daring espionage operations, Operation Gold. In 1953, the CIA and Britain's Secret Intelligence Service came up with a plan to build an underground tunnel approximately 1,476 feet, 450 meters long, stretching from the American sector of Berlin into the Soviet sector. The goal was to intercept Soviet military telephone communications and set up a wiretapping system. The construction of the tunnel began in 1954 and was performed under the strictest secrecy. The tunnel was equipped with the most advanced eavesdropping technology of the time. From May 1955 to April 1956, American and British intelligence intercepted more than 400,000 telephone conversations of the Soviet military, gaining valuable information about troop deployments and military plans. A grand success rate. Well, actually, quite the opposite. A complete failure. The operation was doomed from the start. With the help of double agent George Blake, Soviet intelligence got information on the West's plan right from the start. Soviet leadership decided not to expose the tunnel immediately so as not to reveal their agent. Instead, they fed the intercepted telephone conversations with carefully orchestrated disinformation.
In April 1956, the Soviets decided it was time to end the charade and made it appear as though they had accidentally discovered the tunnel.
Naturally, they promptly held a major international press conference and sparked a massive scandal, publicly condemning the actions of the US and the UK. But the story of the tunnel didn't end there. It simply changed its job, becoming a museum exhibit. Wait, what? They built a museum underground just for this tunnel? Quite the opposite. The tunnel was actually dug out, brought to the surface, restored and displayed at the Allied Museum. However, not all 1,476 feet, 450 meters of the tunnel were preserved, but just 39 feet, 12 meters. This is the story of how far intelligence agencies were willing to go in their shadow games during the 20th century, and how divided and tense Berlin became the epicenter of global espionage intrigues. We'll soon return to the tragedy of the divided city, but for now, let's continue our journey downward. At a depth of 26 feet, 8 meters, lies a place that feels like it was made for an apocalyptic film. This is the Kudam Carré multi-purpose bunker facility. Here we don't see echoes of the devastating World War II, but rather what was left from preparing an even more terrifying war, a nuclear one. The multi-purpose facility was built in the 1970s, at a time when the fear of nuclear war was nearly at its peak. The bunker was designed to withstand a nuclear blast with an epicenter of just 1 mile. According to some reports, the thickness of the walls and ceilings ranges from 12 to 23 inches. The total area of the shelter is 37,566 square feet. Behind the 16-inch, 40-centimeter thick entrance doors, there are several airlock-style chambers, each designed for up to 20 people. In the event of a disaster, everyone needed to follow a strict survival protocol. Upon entering the bunker, all of those sheltering would have to strip naked for decontamination, take a shower, and then put on a special uniform. After that, each person would be assigned to one of the narrow bed spaces, which were placed no more than 23 inches apart from each other. 4-tiered beds fill up most of the space. If panic, an epidemic, or another incident were to happen, the bunker could be divided into 2 equal zones using a partition. And of course, no walking around was allowed. The sheltered had to remain in their designated spots. One would need to get the staff's approval to simply stand and move around. And what about comfort? Sounds like a joke. The amenities were minimal: basic toilets, washing rooms, medical offices, and a tiny kitchen. The only food available was cold canned goods. Fresh water was supplied by reservoirs and a deep well, while air was filtered through special ventilation systems. Energy was provided by diesel generators designed to last exactly 14 days. And what happened after that? Well, actually nothing. The air and electricity supply would be cut off in 2 weeks, and the people would be forced to leave the bunker. Surviving outside remained a very uncertain prospect. Thankfully, this fallout scenario wasn't meant to be, but the place where history froze in anticipation of disaster still sends chills down your spine. Let's continue our descent, and almost immediately we come to some tunnels stretching as deep as 33 feet. Sewage systems? Not exactly. These are rivers, but there's a catch. In Berlin, the first waterway that likely comes to mind is the river Spree.
It flows through Germany's capital, passing by the Reichstag building and Museum Island.
It stretches for 250 miles, with 28 miles running through Berlin. But what is it doing underground? Historically, the Spree frequently flooded the city, causing significant problems for its residents. Imagine a city underwater with streets turning into rivers. The solution? In some areas, the riverbed was deepened and reinforced, while smaller tributaries were buried underground. Yeah, right under the ground. And this led to a whole network of canals and underground aqueducts. But at least the Spree hasn't disappeared from the maps, unlike some other rivers. The Becker is an example of a river that has literally vanished from the city's map. Historically, it flowed through the southwest of Berlin, but in the 19th century it was buried underground. The reason was simple. Urban development requires space, and an open river hindered construction. Today, the Becker's riverbed is partially hidden in drainage tunnels, and its waters flow in the Teertunnel. All that remains of the Becker are the memories preserved in the names of streets and neighborhoods in Berlin. Another river is the Punker. Stretching 18 miles, it begins in Brandenburg and runs through northern Berlin. Unlike the Becker, the Punker has survived, though parts of its riverbed are also hidden underground. In the 19th century, the Punker literally became a garbage canal, where industrial waste was dumped. To prevent epidemics and further pollution, some sections of the river were enclosed in pipes. This significantly impacted the environment. Many species disappeared and the city's landscape changed. That's why Berlin is now restoring the river and bringing it back to the surface. This process is called renaturation. In some parks, such as the Wedding District, the Punker can once again be admired in all its beauty. It's not hard to guess where we're headed next. After all, underground rivers are essentially part of Berlin's sewer system. Let's take a walk through it, gradually descending to a depth of up to 39 feet. The first mentions of a sewer system in Berlin date back to the 18th century. Back then, it was nothing more than open ditches draining directly into the rivers. The result? Diseases, unsanitary conditions, and stench. The rapidly growing city needed a more advanced system to cope with the increasing volume of waste. In the 19th century, the situation changed dramatically. Berlin decided to build what was, at the time, a modern sewer system. In 1879, engineer James Hobrecht took on the project to tackle the wastewater issue. His system featured an extensive network of tunnels crisscrossing the city and treatment facilities nearby. The first modern sewer system was a network of tunnels about 13 to 16 feet deep. Built from brick, these tunnels had arched ceilings to ensure structural strength. Some of these tunnels have been preserved and even turned into tourist attractions. One preserved section is the old collector on Wilhelmstrasse. Built in the late 19th century, this segment was in use until the mid-20th century. Today, it is considered an engineering feat of its time. Berlin's modern sewer system spans hundreds of miles of underground tunnels. The deepest of these go as far as 39 feet underground. They were designed to withstand heavy loads and efficiently remove wastewater, even in densely built-up areas. The system includes not only collectors, but also rainwater reservoirs. This is particularly crucial in Berlin, where heavy rains can drastically increase the load on the sewage system. But these are not the only tunnels at a depth of up to 39 feet. At the same depths, there are escape tunnels, places that decided human fates. Let's go back to the time of the Cold War. In 1962, a group of young people set out to prove that no barriers could stop the strive for freedom. Just imagine, you are 20 years old. You pick up a shovel and start digging. How many feet would you dig to save 29 people from a totalitarian regime? Thus began the story of Tunnel 29. One of the most successful and dramatic operations to smuggle people from East Germany to West Berlin. The tunnel was conceived by two Italians, Domenico Sesta and Luigi Spina. They initially wanted to help one family escape to the west. They were soon joined by a student from Dresden, Hasso Herschel, who dreamed of rescuing his sister and her family. Hasso had himself escaped from East Germany a year earlier in 1961. The construction began on the West German side, undertaken by a group of 30 volunteers, mostly students. They started to dig in the summer of 1962. With little rest, minimal equipment, and a constant fear of exposure, they dug manually through damp earth. Every meter of tunnel was a testament to their sweat, fear, and hope. The tunnel stretched from the basement of an old factory in the west to a residential building in East Berlin. Approximately 400 feet were dug manually. All for one goal: freedom. On September the 14th and 15th, 1962, 29 GDR citizens escaped through the tunnel. This gave the tunnel its name. Unlike most other tunnels, whose fate ended in arrests or tragedies, Tunnel 29 avoided casualties and exposure. But how did they manage to succeed? The story of the tunnel is not just about heroism. The construction also required funding. The Italians sold the rights to film the process to the American television network NBC, which sent 2 cameramen to document this event. For this, they received 15,000 German marks each, as well as broadcasting rights in Germany and Italy. Hasso Herschel, who was initially set to receive just 2,000 marks, managed to negotiate equal terms by threatening to leave the project. Funding through filming was a groundbreaking approach to supporting refugees, but it left behind a trail of conflicts. After the successful escape, the group split. 17 volunteers publicly distanced themselves from Sesta, Spina, and Herschel. But Tunnel 29 was just the beginning. In October 1964, beneath a thick layer of soil and in the shadow of the Berlin Wall, one of the boldest and largest escape attempts from East Germany took place. The tunnel was dug from the basement of an abandoned bakery on Bernauer Strasse 97 in West Berlin to a backyard building on Strelitzer Strasse 55 in East Berlin. This route running under the wall became the longest, deepest, and most expensive of all the escape tunnels ever built in Berlin. In April 1964, a group of 35 volunteers, including students from the Free University of Berlin, took on the task. Among them was Reinhard Führer, who had no idea at the time what his future would hold. We'll get to that later. October 3 and 4, 1964, proved to be quite fateful. 57 GDR citizens, including children, used this tunnel to flee East Berlin. People were brought to the backyard building on Strelitzerstrasse, where Reinhard Führer guided them to the tunnel entrance. The organizers, referred to as couriers, had contacted 120 potential escapees in advance. However, among those planning to flee was a Stasi informant from East German intelligence. At midnight on October the 4th, during the second night of escapes, 2 Stasi agents in civilian clothing appeared at the tunnel entrance. They pretended to be escapees and claimed they wanted to bring another friend. Instead, they returned with border guards. A confrontation led to death of one of the guards, Egon Schultz. The following day, the East German press declared the tunnel escape participants terrorists from West Berlin and accused them of killing a border guard. The GDR's Communist Party used the incident for propaganda, turning Schultz into a martyr of the war. Only after Germany's reunification was it revealed that Schultz's death was caused by friendly fire. Tunnel 57 went down in history as one of the most successful escape operations from East Germany. It attracted worldwide media attention, including coverage by Stern magazine, which partially funded the construction, contributing around 30,000 marks. Additional funding even came from West Germany's Ministry of the Interior. However, the shootout incident sparked controversy, causing many participants to step back from future operations. Some, like Wolfgang Fuchs and Hasso Herschel, continued to help others escape. Reinhard Führer was one of the main organizers, returned to studying physics and eventually became an astronaut. Today, a memorial plaque marks the site of the tunnel. It serves as a reminder of both sides of this story, the successful escape of 57 people and the tragic death of Egon Schultz. Tunnel 57 remains a powerful testament to the fact that no wall can suppress humanity's desire for freedom. Over the entire existence of the Berlin Wall, more than 70 escape tunnels were dug in attempts to flee to the other side. However, only 19 were successful. At roughly the same depth of up to 39 feet beneath Alexanderplatz lies one of Berlin's largest shelters. It was constructed between 1941 and 1943. Tiefbunker, meaning deep bunker, served as a refuge for thousands of city residents during World War II. The foundation for the bunker was laid as early as the 1920s. At that time, the plan was to build a subway line connecting Alexanderplatz to Lichtenberg and Friedrichsfelde. However, those plans were put on hold due to World War I. It wasn't until the 1940s that the underground structures were repurposed into a bomb shelter. During air raids, the bunker could accommodate up to 3,500 people, ensuring their relative safety. With its thick walls and complex network of tunnels, it became the symbol of hope and survival for many ordinary Berliners. After the war, the bunker was abandoned and faded from public attention. Only in recent decades has interest in these underground structures been renewed, and now they attract researchers and tourists. Descending just a few more feet to a depth of 46 feet, we encounter more remnants of one of the darkest periods in Europe's 20th century history. These are the dungeons of the Umbolthain Flak Tower. The structure is located in the northern part of Berlin, in the middle of the Umbolthain Park. The giant tower was built in 1941 to defend Berlin from Allied air raids. It was one of 3 flak towers in Berlin. The others were located in Tiergarten and Friedrichshain, but the one in Umbolthain had been preserved better than the others. The tower was a true behemoth. Its walls were 6.5 feet thick, and its ceilings were 10 feet of solid concrete. The underground sections were used to store ammunition, equipment, and to shelter thousands of residents. These structures had an overall capacity of up to 10,000 people. Beneath the tower were tunnels and storage spaces that extended to at least 46 feet deep. After Germany's capitulation in 1945, the Allies began to demolish such structures. This was done just in case, to prevent their reuse for military purposes, not only by defeated Germany, but by anyone else. However, Umbolthain proved to be so sturdy that it could not be completely destroyed. The partially demolished tower became part of Umbolthain Park. Later enthusiasts took the initiative, and since 2004, parts of the tower, including some of its underground levels, have been open for guided tours. But as we go deeper underground, we see even more massive structures. At a depth of 59 feet, we find tunnels, this time wide and spacious. These are the tunnels of the Berlin U-Bahn, a network that reaches depths of up to 59 feet. The Berlin U-Bahn is a living history. Opened in 1902, it was the first subway system in Germany and marked the beginning of a new era in urban transportation. Additionally, it was one of the first subways in continental Europe. The idea of building an underground railway was proposed by the renowned engineer Werner von Siemens, the founder of the Siemens Company. In 1880, he suggested constructing underground railways, but construction didn't begin until 1896.
Today, roughly 80% of the subway runs underground.
However, the first section was built not only at ground level, but also elevated on viaducts. From that point on, work continued almost non-stop for nearly 20 years, and the results were groundbreaking for the time. By 1913, Berlin already had 47 metro stations across several lines, covering key areas of the city. These lines served the growing population of the capital, helping to address the transportation challenges of the rapidly developing metropolis. Most of the work was carried out by AEG and Siemens. They competed so fiercely for the contracts that some sections of the tunnels even had different widths. This would be absurd by today's standards. Yet in the early 20th century, the Berlin U-Bahn was a real technological breakthrough of its time, and it seemed that things would only get better and bigger in the future. But that wasn't the case. World War I brought these ambitious urban planning dreams to a halt for an entire decade. It wasn't until January the 30th, 1923, that the first new section was finally opened between the Hallisches Tor and Stettinger Bahnhof stations. The subway continued to develop, even though it was a significant challenge for the Weimar Republic, as Germany was called after its defeat in World War I. By the late 1930s, the metro network had become one of the most advanced in Europe. Particular attention was paid to the aesthetics. Stations were adorned with mosaics, decorative columns, and elegant signage. However, in 1939, metro construction came to a halt once again due to World War II. All resources were redirected to military needs, and the tunnels themselves were prepared for a new, much grimmer role. With the onset of World War II, the U-Bahn was not only a network of transport arteries, but also a shelter for city residents. Tunnels and stations were repurposed into bomb shelters. Take, for instance, the Gesundbrunnen station. At first glance, it looks like a typical subway station. However, back in the 1930s, long before World War II began, the first shelter system was constructed in the basement of the station's northern vestibule. When the war started, efforts to create bomb shelters intensified dramatically. The deep location of the station's tunnels made it possible to transform the large empty spaces left during its construction into fully equipped bunkers. This led to the creation of 4 large bomb shelters along the station. One was located between the tunnel ramp and the basements at the corner of Ramlerstrasse and Badstrasse. The second was built in the southern vestibule. The third was in the northern vestibule. The fourth was above the dead-end tracks north of the station under Blockplatz Square. These shelters were designed to accommodate thousands of people seeking protection from Allied bombing raids. Thousands of Berliners descended underground to escape the constant air raids. After the war, it took years to rebuild the metro. Some tunnels were abandoned while others were repurposed as storage facilities or temporary housing. After the war, Berlin was divided into spheres of influence, and in 1961 the border became a physical reality with the construction of the Berlin Wall. But what happened to the metro? Its lines crossed the entire city, so was it put on hold? No, the subway continued to operate, but the way it functioned may again send chills down your spine. The metro, which once connected east and west, now also became a line of division. Some lines that started in the west passed through East Berlin territory. Stations located in the eastern zone were closed off. They were welded shut, with full lighting switched off, leaving only a dim illumination and security. These ghost stations, which were called Geisterbahnhöfe, remained haunting symbols of the divided city for years. For residents of West Berlin, passing through such sections of the metro was a moment filled with unease and a stark reminder of the city's division. Trains raced through dark tunnels beneath East Berlin, as if to remind passengers that just a few feet above them, people were living under strict control. The Friedrichstraße station held a special role. It became a kind of border checkpoint for crossings between East and West. The entrance on the eastern side was strictly controlled, and the station turned into a real barrier between the two parts of the city. Yet even under these conditions, the metro remained a symbol of hope. It reminded people that despite political barriers, the city continued to exist as a unified whole, if only underground. Today, the Berlin U-Bahn comprises 9 lines stretching over 90 miles with 175 stations. Each year, U-Bahn trains cover 82 million miles and transport over 500 million passengers. One of the deepest stations is Alexanderplatz, the lower level of the U8 line. It lies at a depth of approximately 59 feet. However, it's not the only one. Several other stations are at around the same depth. Overall, parts of the Berlin U-Bahn are like museum exhibits themselves, serving as reminders of the fascinating and, at times, deeply tragic history of this city.
Yes, Berlin and its underground mysteries are truly impressive, but in some places, the tunnels go even deeper, concealing far darker secrets.
This is one of the largest cities in the world by area, and one of the most populous cities in Europe. Over 13 million people live here, more than 20 million if you count the surrounding metropolitan area. Every day around 3 million cars travel through its streets. This city is Moscow. But everything you see on the surface is just a small part of what's hidden. Hundreds of kilometers of secret tunnels, bunkers built to withstand nuclear strikes, flooded mines and mysterious corridors whose purpose still remains unknown, all stretch beneath the city. Here, the past, present and future intertwine. And today we'll show you the most unexpected underground secrets of the Russian capital. Secrets people prefer not to talk about. What lies beneath Moscow? Our journey begins at street level. At the very top there's asphalt or paving stones, typically extending about 2 inches deep. Cobblestones can be thicker, up to 3 inches. Below that, at a depth of up to 6.3 inches, lies the leveling layer. This layer ensures a smooth surface before the asphalt is laid. It is often made of coarse asphalt, concrete, or even solid concrete on heavily trafficked roads. Deeper still, at around 18 inches, there's the base layer made of crushed stone or gravel. It supports the entire road, preventing it from falling apart. Beneath that is the bedding layer. This is a sandy cushion reaching down 26 inches. This layer prevents water accumulation and helps distribute the load evenly across the road. In Moscow, communication and power supply cables buried directly in the ground are typically laid at depths of 2 to 4 feet. The water pipes lie a little further down at a depth of 5 to 6.5 feet. In Moscow, they need to be buried deeper to prevent them from bursting in winter due to freezing temperatures. And right nearby, remnants of ancient settlements predating even the earliest roads. At a depth of up to 10 feet in Kolomenskoye Park, there are the remains of Dyakovo Hill Fort, one of the oldest settlements in the region. Long before Moscow even existed, life was already thriving here. They built fortifications, farmed, fought and made sacrifices to their gods. So what have archaeologists found? First and foremost, spear and arrow tips, battle axes. Then sickles, knives, scrapers and countless pieces of jewellery. The remains of cows, sheep, horses, and among them, surprisingly, bear bones.
Does that mean that people living here actually had pet bears?
Not quite. It simply proves that they were skilled hunters. Other finds include amulets, stone idols, bone pendants with mysterious carvings, ritual knives, pottery and other sacred objects. The Dyakovo Hill Fort was destroyed and burned many times, but each time it was rebuilt. It endured for 1,000 years, but people gradually moved on and in search of better lands. Eventually, Moscow emerged nearby.
Near Philly Park, about 10 feet below ground, lie the remains of the Kuntsevo Hill Fort, an ancient settlement from the 11th to 13th centuries.
It was the home of the old Slavic Vatici tribe. Beneath the ground there are remains of homes, farm buildings and palisade fortifications. Judging by the finds, the inhabitants engaged primarily in farming, hunting, fishing and livestock breeding. Discoveries also include bone, clay and metal objects, various cast tools and jewellery. But this place has a darker side. According to legend, there was once a church here, and one day it simply sank into the ground, along with the people inside. Shepherds claimed that at night one could hear the sound of bells from underground. It sounds like a mere folktale, but there are indeed mysterious voids lying beneath the site. Archaeologists have discovered traces of buildings and layers of earth that seem to have sunk several meters down. But that church was nowhere to be found. It seems like this place has accumulated many eerie legends. But why? Could it be due to the strange artifacts found nearby? In the streams near the hill fort, one can still find peculiar objects called devil's fingers. They certainly look eerie, especially to someone living in the 13th century. Many fears and superstitions likely arose because of them. But in reality, they are nothing more than fossilized belemnites, extinct cephalopod mollusks. Yet there are far greater mysteries lying under Moscow. Most of them, however, were man-made. At a depth of around 16.5 feet, we find ourselves in the heart of the city's infrastructure, among the engineering corridors. Here underground tunnels known as utility vaults house high-voltage power lines. At the lowest level of this system, there are massive tunnels with power cables. They are true underground highways for electricity, connecting substations, metro stations and major facilities. These tunnels are large enough to walk through upright, though navigating them can be tricky due to the water underfoot. In the past, some of these tunnels even led directly to the metro shafts. What's astonishing is that some of these giant vaults look as though they were built just recently. Yet inside, there are no people, no operational equipment, just abandoned tunnels with perfectly preserved walls. Who built them and why? Blood-red graffiti on the walls only reinforces the eerie horror movie-like atmosphere. And then there are rooms that resemble living spaces. Clearly something large and important was being constructed here, until suddenly, mostly everything was abandoned. How many more such structures lie beneath Moscow? At a depth of around 23 feet, there's a nuclear fallout shelter from the 1970s. And it's hidden underground right next to the Moscow city skyscrapers. Inside, the shelter features metal bunk beds, ventilation systems, restrooms and water supplies. But staying here for more than 2 days would be a bad idea. Water is scarce. And what about the toilets? In complete isolation, they turn into primitive cesspits. Not the most pleasant setup for a long stay. The air filtration system is meticulously designed. Under normal conditions, air passes through oil filters that trap radioactive dust. In the event of a chemical attack above the ground, charcoal filters get activated. And if the situation becomes dire, bam, hermetic doors slam shut, sealing the shelter. Air no longer circulates. Now every breath uses up the oxygen stored in the tanks, while chemical absorbers work to remove the carbon dioxide. The system is functional, but not for long. All operations were controlled from a command center where even phone communication was encrypted. Picking up the receiver and dialing a number, not that simple. Calls were only connected manually through a designated operator. Now you can see all of this for yourself. The bunker has been transformed into an interactive museum where visitors can handle old military telephones, listen to ominous alert recordings, and even find out what training samples of chemical weapons smell like. Yes, these aren't actual combat agents, but other substances that just happen to smell similarly. Also, there are old Soviet sirens here. Monstrous devices that roar at 123 decibels, which is louder than a jet taking off. Such sirens are still on the roofs of Moscow, but today they mostly serve as museum exhibits. Other bunkers at this depth haven't been turned into museums. Yet. But that doesn't mean we can't take a closer look at what's down there. At a depth of 23 feet lie underground chambers of Moscow State University. But calling it just a university wouldn't do it justice. It's practically a city within a city built in 1953. Beneath its grand main building hides a two-level underground complex. The first level serves as a bomb shelter, while the second consists of communication tunnels. But there are rumors. Some say a secret passage connects Moscow State University to the metro. It was supposedly designed for evacuating students in the case of war. Narrow, aging staircases of the first underground level seem to lead there. Below them, an enormous flooded shaft stretches deep underground. Could this be the elusive escape route to the metro? But that's not all. On the first underground level, long dark corridors stretch behind massive hermetic doors, as heavy as submarine hatches. Beyond them, empty halls reminiscent of post-apocalyptic video games. But all this isn't a movie set. The cold concrete, rusting metal, and unsettling silence are all real. One of the doors conceals other corridors. They're dark and occasionally flooded. And finally, there's a place hidden behind thick metal barriers. Peering through a small opening in the door, one can see what lies inside. Another ominous space, with a camera inside. Some say this isn't the lowest level. Rumors have it that there may be some sort of cryo chambers. Unfortunately, no one has managed to descend any further. At a depth of 23 feet, there's also a bomb shelter on the grounds of the Russian Aircraft Corporation, MiG. The entrance is through a massive reinforced hermetic door. Each door leads to a different world. Air filtration rooms, water storage tanks, and bunker bathrooms. Interestingly, even here, in a shelter designed for an apocalypse, there are bidets in the restrooms. Yes, comfort first, no matter what. There's also a water supply for 600 people. 10 tanks, each holding 2.5 tons. But the strangest thing is that tap water still runs here, even though this place has long been abandoned. At depths of up to 23 feet, other bunkers were built for one of the pivotal leaders of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin. He ruled the country in the first half of the 20th century, and his reign was marked by strict security measures. The most secretive World War II-era bunker was located directly beneath the Kremlin, the historic complex housing the Russian government. It was given a deliberately cryptic Soviet-style name, Object Number 1. Constructed in 1941, this hidden facility was built right next to the government between Kremlin buildings. For several months in 1941 and 1942, it served as a wartime command center during bombings. What happened to it afterwards remains a mystery. But this kind of facility wasn't the only one. At a depth of 23 feet lies another so-called Stalin's bunker, Object Number 18, located on the outskirts of Moscow in the Kuntsevo district. It was built in 1941 at the height of World War II. The secret facility was underground a government dacha, a small country estate. The bunker became operational in 1942. However, it's unlikely that Stalin visited it often, as the bombings of Moscow ceased that same year. Today, the site has been declassified. Of course, these are not Stalin's only bunkers. Similar structures existed across the country, and many remain unknown. Now, let's descend a bit further to explore other historic underground sites. The next stop is the catacombs directly beneath the Kremlin, descending 26 feet deep. It's hard to imagine the kind of secrets they hold. The sheer scale is staggering. Entire districts were once connected through a network of basements. Stone vaults, rusted pipes, collapsed passageways. Once these tunnels stretched across an entire block, but most of them have now been sealed off. However, one basement remains intact, and it's a true time capsule. Mold creeps along the walls. 17th century loading arches stand crumbling, Soviet-era tiles and rotting wooden supports that are on the verge of collapse. Against this eerie backdrop, a mysterious white stone alcove stands out. Traces of excavation are everywhere. What were they looking for here? Gold, hidden treasures, or another secret passage? Nearby, enormous cast iron pipes with gurgling water, remnants of old ventilation systems, and a strange metal mechanism hint at a deeper level hidden below. There are dozens of such places under Moscow. Some enthusiasts are still searching for the lost library of Ivan the Terrible, Russia's first Tsar. This is a legendary archive of rare books and documents. Legend has it that the Russian Tsar hid the library so well that no one has been able to find it for centuries. Now we descend to yet another Stalin-era bunker, hidden 33 feet underground. The site is located in Lipki, a settlement in the Moscow region. It was once Stalin's countryside retreat, a former noble estate. Today the place is abandoned. The once picturesque mansion has fallen into disrepair, and the bunker entrance is hidden in one of the service buildings nearby. These tunnels were flooded for decades. Whether they were intentionally flooded to hide something or if the water seeped in through the soil is unclear. It was only recently that the water was pumped out, yet the air still carries the stench of hydrogen sulfide, and the walls are scarred with corrosion. Below, the corridors are downright terrifying. Where do they lead? No one knows. By the door, there is a heavily rusted electrical panel, dating to either wartime or possibly even the Tsarist era. One can't help but notice that it's made from marble. But why? No, it's not really for decoration, but rather for insulation. On the ceiling, there are very strangely shaped ventilation ducts. The elevator shaft still has some attic doors. Further down the passage, the interior shifts dramatically. This is no longer a utility space, but rather a ceremonial one. Likely Joseph Stalin once walked here himself. The corridor stretches an astonishing 427 feet, almost 1.5 football fields in length, and all of it is clad in marble. Next, there's another surprising artifact, the elevator door, the very same elevator that Stalin likely used to descend into his underground marble fortress. Through another long passage, one reaches the life support module. At the core of the bunker lies its engine room, with remnants of an old generator. It once powered the air filtration, electricity and water systems, ensuring survival in case of a major attack. Speaking of water, we've already seen how it seeps through and floods Moscow's underground structures. But did you know that under this megacity at depths of up to 49 feet, there are hundreds of underground rivers? In total, there are about 800 rivers and streams in Moscow, and at least 150 of them were diverted underground into concrete collectors as part of urban expansion. Here are some of the most remarkable underground rivers. Take, for example, the Tarakhanovka River. The name is amusing. Tarakhan means cockroach in Russian. This small river stretches just 5 miles, with part of its underground collector running directly beneath the old cemetery. The walls here are lined with broken bricks and tangled tree roots. This place clearly has a strange life of its own. Rust stalactites hang from the ceiling, while mysterious red streaks run down its walls. It's quiet, but not completely silent. The subway runs beneath the concrete walls of the collector. Then there's Neglinka, one of Moscow's largest rivers, completely buried underground with no open sections remaining. Above ground, it once originated from the Pashensky swamp near the Marina Rosha. The river's collector begins at the Savyolovskaya railway station near the Stankolit platform. You can access it through a sewer manhole. Inside, the tunnels look like something built by medieval masons rather than modern engineers. Arched ceilings, circular passageways and dark corridors. Inside, there are small egg-shaped drainage tunnels that keep the water moving and prevent stagnation. Another Moscow river with an eerie name is Kruvyanka, which translates to Bloody River. And the name is no exaggeration. There used to be a slaughterhouse here, and its waste was dumped directly into this river. Today, part of the river remains above ground, while another section flows through a concrete collector. From the outside, the entrance pipe looks unremarkable, giving no hint of the vast, cavernous spaces hidden beyond it. Inside, the collector is littered with decades' worth of trash. The powerful water currents can flood it in just 10 minutes during heavy rains. As the city developed, new layers were added on top to level the terrain. This is how the river ended up at a depth of 49 feet. But we're about to go even deeper. In fact, much deeper. At depths of up to 131 feet, there are so-called deep-lying utility vaults. Entry here is strictly prohibited. What you're about to see are unique shots from people who managed to sneak inside against all odds. It's said that this collector isn't from Stalin's era, but is a modern construction that meets the highest modern standards. It is capable of functioning autonomously for many years, thanks to its powerful ventilation and its own firefighting system. The entire structure is reinforced with metal shielding, making it capable of withstanding a nuclear attack. There are multiple passageways, most probably leading to metro, power substations, and possibly classified sites. What lies beyond these tunnels remains a mystery. But up next is a place we know much more about. A place that anyone can visit today. However, in Soviet times, almost no one even knew it existed. At a depth of approximately 141 feet, there lies a classified archive bunker built in the 1950s for the USSR Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For decades, this facility remained completely secret, hidden from the public eye until very recently. It wasn't until 2018 that this place was declassified. So, what was hidden there? This bunker could be called the Soviet Union's underground Fort Knox. But instead of gold, it safeguarded top-secret diplomatic archives. Just imagine an archive stretching for dozens of miles, containing documents that could have potentially changed the course of history. It was a fully operational, secure storage facility equipped with life support systems, airtight doors, and an independent power supply. Inside, there were metal shelves, miles of documents, armored doors, and spy-proof walls. Officially, the bunker stored foreign ministry records, diplomatic correspondence, and strategic agreements. However, there were rumors that it also contained sensitive intelligence on world leaders. It's possible that the original secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact might have been hidden here. It was a non-aggression agreement between the USSR and Nazi Germany, signed on August 23, 1939. However, just 2 years later, in 1941, Hitler violated the pact by waging war against the Soviet Union. But why store these critical documents in such a deep underground bunker? During the Cold War, Soviet officials were seriously preparing for a nuclear apocalypse. Diplomats needed not only to survive, but also preserve vital records about the USSR's international relations. Even if Moscow were reduced to ashes, these documents were meant to endure. Today, the bunker is open for guided tours. However, even now, it's unclear whether everything has actually been declassified. Perhaps there are still documents stored there that could change our understanding of Soviet and global history. But just a little deeper under Moscow lies a completely different layer. An underground world that has been forming since the 19th century. At depths of up to 151 feet lies Moscow's sewer network. Compared to other European cities, Moscow's sewage system is relatively young. It's just over 100 years old. How did it all begin? Until the 19th century, the waste was disposed in the simplest way possible, by dumping it into the Moscow River, the Yauza, and the very same Niglinka. And from there it flowed downstream. The result was an overpowering stench and constant outbreaks of cholera and typhoid that were considered normal at the time. The first attempt to clean things up came in the 17th century when part of the Niglinka River was buried and primitive wooden drainage systems were introduced. But the real sanitation revolution only began in the late 19th century when Moscow's population began to grow, along with its waste problems. In 1898, the first centralized sewage system was built. It was designed by engineer Gustav Eiffler, and it was a breakthrough. For the first time, waste wasn't dumped into open rivers and was redirected into underground collectors. Today, Moscow's sewer system is a massive engineering structure. The network spans over 5,280 miles, and the main collectors are up to 15 feet in diameter. In fact, they are large enough not only to walk upright, but even for a truck to drive through. Moscow's sewer system is divided into several subsystems, each with its own role. Storm drains collect rainwater and discharge it directly into rivers without any purification. Household sewage lines, on the other hand, transport wastewater to treatment facilities. During heavy rains, giant underground reservoirs activate to take in excess water and hold it until the rain subsides. And at the deepest levels, main underground channels act as vital flood control arteries, keeping the city's infrastructure running in any weather. Every year, engineers conduct routine inspections, removing tons of grease, sand and construction debris that accumulate inside. The deepest sewer system in Moscow is the Obruchevsky Deep-Level Sewer Canal. It runs at a depth of up to 151 feet and has a capacity of 528 million gallons per day. Impressive, isn't it? But wait, there's even more to come. At a depth of 164 feet, you'll find Moscow's first deep underground bunker, which was designed as early as 1933. Its walls are made of solid reinforced concrete. The bunker was integrated into the metro system. One exit led directly to the platform of the Kirovskaya metro station, Chiste Prody, while others connected to a network of underground tunnels. The project was designed under extreme secrecy. Even in official documents, the station's name was replaced with dots. Object near metro station. ... To maintain cover, funding came from the reserve fund of Metrostroy, the main contractor that constructed the Moscow Metro. However, only 9 people knew what was actually being constructed. The shaft was dug in the yard of house number 33 on Kirovskaya Street for all the Moscow residents to see. By 1936, the concrete framework was complete. The bunker featured 2 floors, an independent power supply, gas filtration systems, and ventilation. Eyewitnesses report that the interior was surprisingly well furnished, with plush armchairs, velvet-covered walls, and a control panel with direct communication to military command. There was even a shower, and also a special sealed telephone intended for extreme emergencies. Finding a way to disguise the entrance was a challenge. At one point, they even considered building the entrance through a school. In 1937, the facility was completed. Above it, they constructed the Moscow Military District's Air Defense Headquarters, and the bunker itself went on combat duty. It remained operational for most of World War II and became the prototype for dozens of underground command centers across the country. Now let's descend to a depth of 213 feet. Here lies Bunker 42, a portal of the Cold War era. Located under the center of the capital, it was designed to save the country's top leadership in the event of a nuclear strike. With thick reinforced concrete walls, airtight doors, and full autonomy, this bunker could have survived even a direct nuclear attack. Constructed in the 1950s, it was built during the time when tensions between the USSR and the USA were rapidly escalating. The nuclear arms race was in full swing, and many believed that a nuclear war was imminent. This facility housed a backup command post for the General Staff, responsible for coordinating a retaliatory nuclear strike in case Moscow was destroyed. Inside, a fully functional underground city with all the necessary infrastructure was created. It was equipped with operation rooms with maps of potential nuclear apocalypse scenarios, direct phone lines to the Kremlin, hermetically sealed airlocks, and advanced radiation-proof ventilation. A separate railway line existed, enabling the secret evacuation of top leadership. There were also stockpiles of food, water, and fuel, enough to last several months. All of this was in total secrecy. For decades, the facility did not appear on maps. Even the construction workers had incomplete information. Each worker knew only of their specific task. Officially, the site was listed as a standard warehouse. After the collapse of the USSR, the bunker was abandoned. However, in 2006, it was converted into an interactive Cold War museum. Today, visitors can literally step into the past, explore Soviet command posts, and even press the legendary red button. But if we descend another 65 feet, we'll find ourselves back in the present, amidst the chaos of modern Moscow. Yes, at 276 feet below ground, life in the Moscow Metro is in full swing. It is, without exaggeration, a true underground metropolis. A vast web of tunnels and stations that serve millions of passengers daily. The metro's history dates back to 1935, when the first tunnels were dug by hand using pickaxes and open pit methods. Initially, there was just one line with 11 stations. Today, the Moscow Metro has expanded to 14 lines, 271 stations and 292 miles of tracks, making it one of the largest and most intricate metro systems in the world. The deepest station, Park Pobedy, lies at a depth of 276 feet, about the same height as the Statue of Liberty, but only underground. It also boasts the longest escalators in the system, stretching 413 feet. With peak hour train intervals of just 90 seconds, Moscow's metro ranks among the fastest in the world. Each day it transports around 6 million people, more than the entire population of some countries. But the Moscow Metro isn't just a transportation system, it's also a work of art. More than 40 stations have been declared cultural heritage sites, featuring grand chandeliers, mosaics and columns that make them feel more like halls of a massive palace than a subway. With its mosaic-adorned ceilings, Mayakovskaya is a masterpiece of Art Deco. Komsomolskaya exudes Baroque grandeur, and Ploshad Revolutsky is guarded by bronze soldiers and workers. The metro wasn't built only for transportation. During World War II, people sought refuge here from bombings. During the air raids, 217 children were born in the metro. However, history could have taken a very different turn if the Soviet leadership had not changed their mind about destroying the metro. In mid-October 1941, the situation near Moscow was critical. The Soviet troops were suffering defeat, and the city braced for a last-ditch defense. The metro was a crucial strategic asset. It could be used to transport troops, store supplies and provide shelter. But if the capital fell, it would also hand the enemy a ready-made underground infrastructure right beneath the city. This is why on October 15, 1941, Soviet Transport Minister Lazar Kaganovich ordered the immediate shutdown of the metro and requested proposals for destroying this strategic object to be submitted within 3 hours. By October 16th, the metro was no longer operating. The result? Mass panic. Thousands fled the city and chaos erupted. Fearing total collapse, Soviet leaders abandoned the idea of destroying the metro. That same day, the metro was powered back on, and by evening, the trains resumed service. This was the only day in history that the Moscow metro stopped operating. There are also rumors of hidden tunnels in the Moscow metro. At the very least, some sections are completely inaccessible to regular passengers. In the past, it was relatively easy to sneak into these technical facilities, and security was minimal. Today, however, security measures are far stricter, with entry permitted only with official clearance and metro personnel escort. But there is something even deeper, and people prefer not to talk about it. All these tunnels, chambers, secret bunkers, and even flooded underground spaces pale in comparison to what lies even deeper. Yes, deeper than the metro, and this is one of Moscow's greatest secrets. We are talking about Metro 2, located at a depth of 620 feet, and its story is worthy of a movie adaptation. In 1991, the USSR completely collapsed. A year later, Russian writer Vladimir Gonik published a novel titled The Abyss, where he described some secret tunnels beneath Moscow. Their scale was mind-blowing and the depth unbelievable. It was Gonik who originally coined the term Metro 2, claiming that while his book was embellished, it was inspired by real rumors among metro construction workers. But someone beat him to it. In 1991, the CIA published a report titled Military Forces in Transition, which explicitly mentioned a classified underground transport system in Moscow. According to the report, the tunnels ran parallel to the regular metro and were intended for the evacuation of top Soviet leadership in case of war. Estimates suggest that Metro 2's tunnels reach depths of 660 to 980 feet and are large enough to accommodate up to 10,000 people. Over the years, declassified archives have gradually revealed more details about Moscow's underground special facilities. While they don't explicitly mention Metro 2, they do reference multiple classified structures, including the Kremlin Complex No. 103, with a narrow-gauge railway, long-range air intakes of the metro system, a deep single-track tunnel leading to object number 54 beneath the Moscow River, and the mysterious Vetka system, CHZ 1090. Together, these facilities have become unofficially known as Metro 2. By the 2000s, discussions about Metro 2 were growing louder. In 2001, former KGB Colonel Oleg Gordievsky, who defected to the UK in 1985 after secretly working for British intelligence for 11 years, gave an interview where he remarked,
"You still don't know the KGB's biggest secret: enormous underground cities, entire communication networks, an entire system of such facilities. But, of course, no one will show them to you."
In 2004, Vladimir Shevchenko, who headed protocol services under Gorbachev and Yeltsin, confirmed the existence of a Kremlin line stretching from the Kremlin to Stalin's nearby dacha in Volinskaya, though he noted it was no longer in use. Mikhail Poltorarin, former deputy prime minister under Yeltsin, claimed that a vast network of tunnels existed, featuring a wartime command post and branches leading to the Moscow region. Even Dmitry Gayev, former leader of the Moscow Metro, directly stated in 2007,
"I would be surprised if Metro 2 didn't exist."
So what's really there? There are some specific details about at least a couple of facilities. Object number 100. It's a classified underground tunnel shelter that connects the Kremlin, the old square historic center, and the former KGB headquarters on Lubyanka. It was designed for evacuating top government officials and swift movement between key government buildings in the event of an emergency. In the 1960s, the tunnel had a narrow-gauge railway with small electric rail cars. Its current condition remains unknown, but its depth ranges from 103 to 180 feet depending on the section. Not incredibly deep, but just wait. There's also the Vetka object, a separate secret metro line. It was built specifically for the evacuation of high-ranking officials. They were supposed to be transported from government complexes and Ministry of Defense bunkers in central Moscow to more protected special facilities in the Remenki area. At one point, a photo of the station platform from this system even leaked into the public domain. The Vetka tunnels contain standard railway tracks, but without a third rail for power. Instead, the tracks are embedded in concrete slabs, allowing vehicles to drive through the tunnels as well. And the depth, by metro standards, is truly mind-blowing. At University Station and Remenki, Vetka plunges to a staggering 620 feet, as of now. For now, it is the deepest underground structure in Moscow that we know about.
Perhaps there are even deeper secret places that we will learn about in tens or even hundreds of years. For now, we'll explore the next metropolis, which hides beneath it, an entire city.
The northern capital, a city that for a long time remained hidden from the outside world. A place where the ruins of ancient dynasties intermingle with futuristic skyscrapers. It is the heart of the most populous nation in the world. Over 21 million people call it their home. It is here that China's political power, cultural heritage, and economic might come together. But there is something else in Beijing hidden beneath the noisy streets and ancient avenues. A maze that holds the secrets of millions. A world where modern subway lines intertwine with endlessly long old bunkers, where entire communities live unnoticed. Today we'll dive into its underground layers and uncover what lies beneath Beijing. Let's start from the very surface. So, the surface course of Beijing's roadways is made of fine-grained asphalt or bitumen. This layer is typically between 25 to 50 millimeters, 1 to 2 inches thick. Below that is the binder course, with a thickness of 50 to 100 millimeters, 2 to 4 inches, also made of bitumen or asphalt of a different grade. Next comes the base course. This layer is made of crushed stone, gravel, or a sand-gravel mixture. It distributes the load and maintains the structural integrity of the road surface. The recommended minimum thickness for the base course is 100 millimeters, 4 inches. But at this point, we are 30 centimeters, 12 inches deep. And here is where things start to get more interesting. From 0.8 to 1.2 meters, 2.5 to 4 feet. This is where most of the city's gas pipelines are laid. This depth complies with the standards of low-pressure underground gas pipelines used to supply residential buildings. At about the same depth, you'll also find cable ducts and power lines. This is Beijing's nervous system, which provides energy and communication to both residential homes and business centers. Fiber optic cables ensuring internet connectivity across the city also run here. From 1.2 to 2 meters, 4 to 6.5 feet. At this depth, you'll find the city's main water supply pipes. Although Beijing has a subtropical climate, winters can be quite cold, so the pipes are laid deep enough to prevent freezing and bursting. From 2 meters, 6 feet and deeper, you'll start to see the so-called multi-utility tunnels, MUT. Modern districts in Beijing are actively implementing this concept. These tunnels contain several types of utilities at once: water supply, heating, electrical networks, and even telecommunications. They lie at a depth of 2 to 5 meters, 6 to 16 feet, and help centralize the management of utility systems. Moreover, they simplify maintenance, which is crucial in a densely populated and built-up city like Beijing. But that's far from everything you can see at a depth of 2 meters, 6.5 feet in Beijing. In addition to modern utilities, these depths hide some artifacts that offer a lot of insights into the history of the city and all of China. In 2021, more than 100 cultural relics were discovered in 5 tombs at the Liulie site, located on the outskirts of the city. This is where the history of Beijing once began. Just imagine, these relics are over 3,000 years old. So what exactly did the researchers find? First, an unusual architectural structure made of rammed earth, which is uncommon for this region. Other construction methods were usually used in ancient China. Thus, discovering rammed earth architecture in this region is something really special. It is worth noting that the structure was quite massive. It was 28 meters, 92 feet long, with a foundation of 1.62 meters, 5 feet deep. At the same site, more than 20,000 ceramic fragments were found, as well as carbonized seeds of millet, wheat, and soybeans. A bronze sword, arrowheads, and jade and stone relics were also discovered among the artifacts. All of these suggest that a developed agrarian society once thrived in this region. The new findings in Liulie will further portray a panorama of Yan Vassal State, which was a historical foundation of the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei Coordinated Development today. Shan Xixiang, head of the Chinese Society and Cultural Relics, said, "It will also demonstrate how diverse cultures mixed with each other and formed a united Chinese civilization. All these discoveries point to the rich ancient history of Beijing. But its more recent history is just as fascinating. If we go just several meters deeper, we'll discover something truly incredible." Beneath Beijing, at a depth of 8 to 18 meters, 26 to 59 feet, lies a real underground city, surprisingly named Beijing Underground City. This massive network of bunkers, tunnels, and other facilities was built in the late 1960s to early 1970s by order of Mao Zedong. The purpose of the project was to create a shelter for all city residents in the event of a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. At that time, relations between the two countries had sharply deteriorated, and the threat of nuclear conflict was very real. The project was even popularly nicknamed the Underground Great Wall. And yes, when we say the shelter was meant to save all city residents, that's no exaggeration. The Chinese government declared that once completed, the complex would be able to shelter the entire population of Beijing at the time. All 6 million people. With such, for lack of a better word, ambitious goals, it's hard to imagine the scale that this structure would need to be, and its size doesn't fail to impress, to say the least. The total area of the underground city is 85 square kilometers, 33 square miles. To put things in perspective, that's about half the size of Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. But the size is only part of the story. It's not enough just to fit 6 million people somewhere. They still need to eat, sleep, and maintain hygiene. And here's where things get really interesting, because the underground city is by no means a metaphor. The complex was equipped with everything necessary for normal life. Well, as normal as it can be called in the face of a nuclear apocalypse. Living spaces, hospitals and medical units, communication hubs for staying in touch with the outside world, and storage spaces for food, water and equipment. And that's not all. Schools and preschools, restaurants, theatres, factories. There was even a mushroom farm. And the cherry on top, a roller skating rink. But wait, there is more. Additionally, the system included around 70 well drilling sites that could provide water in case of emergency. The complex's ventilation system had 2,300 shafts that could be sealed airtight to protect against poisonous gases. There were also special gas and waterproof hatches, as well as massive concrete gates designed to shield against biochemical attacks, gas attacks, and nuclear fallout. The exact length of the underground city has never been officially disclosed. However, it is believed that the tunnels connect various landmarks. Rumor has it that they link Zhongmanhai, the Great Hall of the People, and even military bases on the outskirts of the city. According to the China Internet Information Center, the tunnels cover all the central districts of Beijing, from Zhuanwumen and Zaidan to Chunmen and Chongwen district, and extend towards the Western Hills. It's even rumored that almost every house in Beijing used to have a hidden hatch leading to these tunnels. In the event of a nuclear strike, the plan was to relocate half of Beijing's population underground, while the other half would be sent to Xishan, the Western Hills. It was believed that the mountainous terrain would protect against the shockwave and, to some extent, block the spread of radioactive clouds. And here we see the first discrepancy in the government's claim that the underground city was supposed to fit all 6 million residents of Beijing. Independent estimates are even more conservative. It is believed that although the underground city managed to grow to the described scale, it could realistically shelter only a few 100,000 people. Nevertheless, even this minimal estimate is impressive. At the very least, the shelter could certainly have accommodated those who built it. More than 300,000 local residents, including school children who worked as volunteers, were involved in the construction. In some cases, tunnels were dug by hand without the use of heavy machinery. Centuries-old city walls, towers, and gates, including the old city gates of Sishemen and Fengshemen and Chongwemen, were demolished to provide building materials for the complex. So what happened to this shelter in the end? Well, in the end, there was no war between China and the USSR. After the construction was completed, locals began to use many sections of the underground city in different ways. The tunnels remained cool in the summer and warm in the winter, so some of them were converted into budget hotels, shopping centres, and even theatres. The underground spaces were particularly active in the 1980s and 1990s when Beijing faced overpopulation and a severe shortage of affordable housing. Many parts of the tunnels were transformed into shopping centres and markets. As Beijing rapidly grew, underground space became a valuable resource. Small private shops began to appear in the tunnels where ordinary citizens eagerly shopped for everyday goods at affordable prices. Initially, these underground markets mainly attracted locals, but eventually became popular among tourists as well. The underground served as a vibrant culture hub. In some parts of the underground city, theatres and concert halls were opened, hosting events for every taste. One of the most interesting projects was transforming part of the complex into a gallery for local artists, where one could see the works of both young and mature masters. Moreover, parts of the tunnels were repurposed for sports events. Some spaces were turned into gyms of different calibers, equipped with all kinds of gear, where local residents could play table tennis, practice yoga, or engage in other physical activity away from the hustle and the heat of the above-ground Beijing. Of course, such practical repurposing didn't reach all parts of the underground city. After all, it was simply too vast. A significant portion inevitably fell into disrepair. Nonetheless, the complex was never entirely abandoned. The tunnels were regularly checked for water leaks and kept in proper sanitary condition to prevent pest infestations and structural damage. In the 1980s, China opened up to the world. By 2000, they even started allowing tourists into the underground city, albeit with some restrictions. But without an imminent military threat, the maintenance of this massive underground complex became less of a priority. Originally, around 90 entrances were built, all concealed within shops along Qianmen's main streets. Many of these have since been destroyed or closed off for renovation. Yes, the complex has been officially under construction since 2008, and it remains so to this day. Nevertheless, certain parts are still used for commercial purposes. In some branches of the underground city, you can find rather conceptual establishments like cocktail bars, where the owners preserve and even emphasize the dungeon-like ambience. According to visitors, even the air here is extremely authentic, heavy and damp. One popular bar, Memory, serves not only as an entertainment venue but also as a kind of museum and interactive historical installation. The vaulted brick ceilings, a massive concrete blast-proof door, and a long hallway transformed into a kind of shooting range with toy guns and balloons to pop. A subtle nod to the site's military pasts are all preserved here. Another place that serves as a reminder of the underground city's direct purpose is a museum near the Dashila sub-district. Tourists once used this museum as one of the entrances to the city, although now closed to the public, it sparks visitors' curiosity with a glass door embedded in the floor. In other parts of the underground city, you can also find more extravagant and even somewhat glamorous spots. For example, there is a wine cellar where the owners regularly hold various events and tastings. But such well-maintained places are now few and far between. Unfortunately, most of the underground city that is still accessible to people has a rather unpleasant reputation. At night, many people, mostly migrant workers and students from rural areas, head to underground spaces known as atomic rooms. Just as the ominous name suggests, conditions in these atomic rooms are often dismal. They're cramped, damp, and poorly ventilated. Many living blocks consist of narrow rooms without even a window, making underground living even harsher. But first, let's explain what we mean by cramped conditions here. Local laws require a minimum living area of 4 square meters, 43 square feet per tenant. Think about it, that's just the legal minimum. And yet many unscrupulous landlords ignore even this standard. Few manage to take pictures or videos of how these places actually look. Authorities prohibit foreigners from accessing this unsightly part of Beijing. However, Antonio Fasilongo, an Italian documentary photographer known for his long-term social and humanitarian projects, managed to do so. His poignant photo report and documentary, The Chinese Dream, reveal some of the secrets of these places, though not all. One of Fasilongo's photographs shows a 4-year-old Jing Jing who lives in such a tiny room with her grandmother, father, and younger brother that it barely fits a bed. Here the stark contrast is heartbreaking. Their home is next to a large area used as a motorcycle parking lot. It's one of the poorest places I've ever been to, says Fasilongo. As early as 2010, in response to issues with landlord negligence and safety threats, Beijing banned the use of nuclear shelters and other underground city spaces as housing. But this decision largely remained on paper, as most bunker residents have nowhere else to go. According to National Geographic, about 1 million people live in Beijing's underground city. The atomic rooms have become a symbol of the stark contrast between the ambitious original vision of the underground city and its present reality. The complex was intended as a refuge for all Beijing residents in the event of a nuclear attack. However, today it's become a home for people facing no threat of a nuclear bomb. Nevertheless, not all rooms are equally bad. More comfortable conditions have been created in some parts of the underground hotels. They have access to water and electricity, allowing residents to at least minimally improve their living conditions. Moreover, many of the residents are ambitious young people who see underground housing as just a temporary phase, until they save enough money for something better. Indeed, photos often show young people with laptops and not so gloomy expressions. Another recent phenomenon involves organizations transforming abandoned shelters into community centers. Some underground spaces have been repurposed into cafeterias, billiard rooms, karaoke spots, calligraphy schools, and even dance schools. Indeed, this underground city is certainly impressive in its scale. Although disheartening in its darker aspects, it definitely leaves no one indifferent. But it's time for us to go further and deeper. What about a true imperial palace? One that lies nearly twice as deep as the atomic underground city. Yep, such an amazing place really exists under Beijing at a depth of around 27 meters, 88 feet. And it was intended for the Chinese Emperor Wanli, though only after his death. This is the awe-inspiring grand underground tomb of the 13th Ming Dynasty ruler and his two empresses. Built between 1584 and 1590, this complex remains the only one of the 13 imperial tombs to have been excavated and opened to the public. Its scale is truly imperial, especially for a burial site. The underground palace covers an area of 1,195 square meters. That's 12,862 square feet. And that's just the underground part. Above ground, it encompasses an entire city-like area of 180,000 square meters, 1,937,504 square feet. The complex consists of 5 interconnected halls, the front, central and rear halls, as well as 2 side chambers located to the left and the right. The largest of these chambers is the rear hall, which originally housed 3 marble thrones and 3 coffins belonging to the emperor and his wives. Now, only replicas stand in their place. Why not the originals? That's a sad story we'll cover in a moment. All halls are connected by narrow passages, and the floors are laid with the so-called golden bricks coated with a special glaze, symbolizing imperial authority. The dungeon walls are made of massive stone slabs and blocks and were once hermetically sealed with the so-called diamond wall, a special structure designed to protect the tomb's content from external factors. During excavations from 1956 to 1958, over 3,000 cultural relics were discovered in the tomb, including rare artifacts such as golden crowns, jade ornaments, and painted ceramics. However, many items were damaged due to the lack of advanced preservation technology at the time. Sadly, even the remains of the emperor and empress were destroyed during the cultural renovation, when the tomb was looted and the mummified bodies were taken outside and desecrated. The tomb reflects traditional Chinese beliefs about the afterlife and the remarkable craftsmanship of Ming Dynasty architects with disconcerting vividness. The central part of the complex, known as the City of Treasures, has a circular shape symbolizing the heavens, while the square front part of the complex represents the earth. This symbolism aligns with the ancient Chinese concept of a round heaven and a square earth, and underscores the importance of imperial power as the link between heaven and earth. Today, the Dingling Tomb serves as a major archaeological and tourist site, preserving unique artifacts from Ming-era burial culture. Most of the relics salvaged during excavations are housed in the tomb's museum, which has become a center for cultural heritage preservation. The underground palace of the Dingling Tomb is not just a burial site, but an architectural masterpiece embodying the power and grandeur of the Ming Dynasty, despite all the trials its treasures and relics went through in the 20th century. It is worth noting that Dingling is the only excavated tomb out of the 13 known. Most Ming Dynasty tombs are located here in a cluster around the outskirts of Beijing. They are collectively known as the 13 tombs of the Ming Dynasty. Indeed, underground Beijing and its surroundings conceal many more mysteries, and the country's authorities are in no hurry to unveil them. Moreover, this is not a matter of the proverbial Chinese secrecy, but a very sensible desire not to repeat past mistakes. During the excavations in the middle of the last century, thousands of items made from silk, textiles, wood and porcelain, as well as many jewels were found in the tomb. But most importantly, scientists discovered the remains of Emperor Wan Li and his two empresses. Unfortunately, the technology and resources needed to adequately preserve the unearthed artifacts were simply not available at the time. A series of preservation attempts have gone terribly wrong, and many silk and textile artifacts ended up in a drafty warehouse. To make the matters worse, the warehouse was damp, with actual water leaks seeping through. As a result, most of these items were damaged, and now only replicas are displayed in the modern museum. The greatest loss occurred during the infamous Cultural Revolution. The so-called Red Guards broke into the Dingling tomb and dragged out the remains of Emperor Wan Li and his empresses to the front of the tomb, where they were posthumously and publicly condemned, burned, and then discarded. Even their coffins were destroyed, along with many other relics. The lessons from the Dingling tomb excavations led to a new policy in the People's Republic of China, prohibiting the excavation of historical sites except for rescue purposes. To date, no proposal to open any other imperial tombs has been approved. Well, having learned about this sad cautionary tale, it's time for us to continue our journey through underground Beijing. And what will happen if we go even deeper? Will we delve further into ancient history? Actually, it's quite the opposite. We've now reached the epitome of modernity in every sense of the word. At a depth of up to 42 meters lies the Beijing subway system. Not just a transportation network, but a real underground metropolis serving millions of people every day. With 27 lines and 490 stations, it covers more than 836 kilometers, 519 miles, crossing 12 urban and suburban districts, as well as one district in the neighborhood, Hebei Province. As of December 2023, the Beijing subway has been recognized as the longest in the world, surpassing even the Shanghai Metro. Construction on the first line began in 1965. The Beijing Metro officially opened on October 1st, 1969. This makes it the oldest metro system in mainland China and indeed in all of East Asia. But the current scale with 27 lines is one of many examples of the so-called Chinese miracle. For over 30 years, until 2002, the Beijing Metro consisted of just 2 lines. Only in the last 2 decades has there been an explosive acceleration in development. Today, the Beijing subway transports an average of around 10.5 million passengers on weekdays, with peak periods reaching up to 13.75 million passengers per day, a record set on July 12, 2019. So let's take a closer look at the structure of this extensive network. Most subway tunnels lie at depths of between up to 30 meters, 98 feet, though some sections go even deeper. For example, Dongxue Station on Line 6 goes down to about 34 meters, 112 feet, currently making it the deepest in the system. But that is not the record. The deepest part of the system is a section of Line 8 between the Quanmen and Wangfujing stations. It reaches a depth of 42 meters, that's 138 feet. This is a completely new part of Line 8, which was put into operation in 2021. It was constructed using a massive tunneling shield. But even this isn't the record. The true record was short-lived, and now only a few people know that the Beijing subway was initially planned to be much deeper. The original design proposed subway tunnels that could also serve paramilitary purposes. For example, Line 1 was conceived as an additional defense mechanism, a means to evacuate city residents to western Beijing in the event of a potential nuclear war. Sound familiar? Indeed it does. Surprisingly, Beijing's underground city, which we've already explored, was built in tandem with the first metro line. Now, what about the depth? Shafts up to 120 meters, that's 390 feet deep, were dug between the future Gongshufen and Mushidin stations, where those initial tunnels were intended to run. However, in May 1960, the high pressure from groundwater, which caused many issues, forced the authorities to abandon the deep tunnel plan in favor of shallower alternatives. The first lines were then constructed at a depth of about 20 meters, 66 feet, using conventional open-cut methods. Despite its already impressive scale, the Beijing subway still struggles to keep up with transportation demand. Key lines like Line 1 and Line 10 are often overcrowded during peak hours. By 2025, the authorities plan to expand the network's total length to nearly 1,000 kilometers, that's 620 miles roughly, and increase the number of stations to handle the expected passenger flow of 18.5 million trips per day. But all these issues concern the fast-paced world of the living. Meanwhile, Beijing's subway has developed eerie urban legends involving those with nowhere to hurry. Namely, the dead. One of the most famous legends is about Line 1, which runs right over the Babuashan cemetery. Rumor has it that its work has encountered numerous unexplained accidents and equipment failures during the construction of this line in the 1960s. Local monks even held ceremonies to appease the restless souls of the disturbed graves, promising the spirits that the subway could close by 11 p.m., as the hours between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. are considered the time of the dead. However, there's a twist. Most, if not all, subway lines in Beijing now close after 11 p.m., with the last train on Line 1 typically arriving at Pingguoan Station at 12:11 a.m. It seems like the spirits no longer mind the timing. Spirits or no spirits, things have never been easy with Line 1. Built with potential military use in mind, rumors persist that it contains phantom stations, inaccessible to ordinary passengers. And indeed, Line 1 has at least 2 restricted access stations, Gaojing and Fushouling. Both stations were originally intended to serve as military bases. However, Fushouling, the penultimate station on the line, was eventually opened to the public as it was located outside the base. Currently under reconstruction, Fushouling is expected to reopen in 2025, finally allowing access to the station that had been previously off limits. As for Gaojing Station, it remains closed and inaccessible. Indeed, after such unexpected twists with mystical and military secrets, it's even a bit frightening to imagine what might await us if we were to go down even deeper under Beijing. And there we would find an even larger, more intricate and vitally important network of large and small tunnels. This is Beijing's sewer system, which reaches depths of up to 50 meters, that's 165 feet in its deepest sections. Beijing's sewer system began to develop rapidly at the end of the 20th century as the city grew and modernized. The population growth rate was nothing short of explosive. In 1950, the city's wastewater discharge was 65,000 cubic meters, that's over 17 million gallons per day. By 1980, this figure had skyrocketed to 2 million cubic meters, over 500 million gallons per day. Half of this came from household water, while the other half from industrial waste. At the time, most of the urban population lived in apartment complexes connected to the sewer system. Almost all wastewater was discharged into nearby rivers and lakes without treatment. Around 1,200 factories also released waste directly into the rivers. This posed the risk of environmental, if not humanitarian, disaster. Beijing had to turn to its sister city, Tokyo, for help, urgently needing technological solutions and skilled experts. The system was constructed in multiple phases over decades. Today, Beijing has at least 15 large centralized treatment plants. The largest of these, the Gaopeidian wastewater treatment plant, is among the biggest in the world, capable of treating up to 1 million cubic meters, over 250 million gallons, of wastewater per day, serving nearly 2.5 million people. Most sewer pipes and collectors are laid at depths of up to 30 meters, that's 100 feet. However, in the busiest and most densely populated parts of the city, pipes go down as deep as 50 meters, 165 feet. This is done to minimize the risk of collapses and leaks and to protect the pipes from pressure and vibrations caused by the subway and surface traffic. The system is designed with Beijing's challenging climate in mind. Rapid temperature fluctuations and seasonal rainstorms are common. To prevent flooding, the sewer system is equipped with special reservoirs that can temporarily hold excess water. In case of heavy rainfall, these underground tanks, over 40 meters, 130 feet deep, can store several million cubic gallons of water, which is then gradually pumped to treatment facilities. Despite the system's high efficiency, new challenges have emerged. Recently, Beijing's groundwater reserves have decreased by 90% compared to the 1950s, creating a risk of soil subsidence and potential damage to underground pipes. Well, from now on, we'll proceed cautiously on our journey. Wait a minute, is there something even deeper beneath Beijing than its deepest sewer collectors? Indeed there is, and here we won't find any foul-smelling urban waste, but a fast-moving flow of vehicles. We're talking about the latest underground tunnel for high-speed traffic drilled only recently in the summer of 2023 at an impressive depth of 75 meters, 246 feet. This is one of Beijing's most advanced and deepest underground transportation projects, constructed beneath the eastern part of the 6th Ring Road. For reference, the Beijing 6th Ring Road is the city's outmost ring highway, located approximately 15 to 20 kilometers, that's 9 to 12 miles, from the city center. And now, beneath its eastern sections lies its high-tech antipode, a 7.4 kilometer, 4.6 mile tunnel. But this isn't just any tunnel, it's a 3-tiered structure. The top level is used for exhaust fumes and general ventilation. The middle level is a 2-way, 6-lane expressway. And the bottom level serves as an evacuation and rescue corridor in case of accidents or other emergencies. This project is a true engineering feat. One of the world's largest tunneling machines, TBM Jinhua, was used in its construction. The machine's shield measures 16 meters, about 52 feet in diameter, and 145 meters, 475 feet in length. Weighing 4,500 tons, it was specially designed to navigate complex geological formations. The tunnel on the 6th Ring Road doesn't just alleviate traffic issues, it also frees up significant surface space for parks, green areas, and other urban facilities, which is especially important for improving the quality of life in the area. The new highway is expected to redistribute traffic flow and enhance Beijing's connectivity with the neighboring regions Tianjin and Hebei province. Well, surely this must be the deepest structure beneath Beijing, with nothing underneath it. Not quite. There's something even deeper. In fact, much deeper. So much deeper that no one knows its exact depth or scale. But it is certainly real. This is the Joint Operations Command Center, JOCC, of the People's Liberation Army, PLA, of China. This complex is considered one of China's most classified and secure military facilities, and its exact location and depth remain a military secret. However, some information is still available, and we're here to share it. The purpose of the JOCC is clear. It is the central headquarters for managing all of China's military operations. Established in 2016 as part of a major military reform by Xi Jinping, it serves as the PLA's primary hub, directing Chinese forces both domestically and internationally. The JOCC is the top command center from which the president and their top military team oversee Chinese armed forces combat operations. What is known about its structure and location? According to some reports, the center lies deep underground in karst caves within the Western Hills National Forest Park, approximately 20 kilometers, that's 12 miles, from the city center. What makes these caves unique is that they lie beneath a granite and limestone layer over 1,000 meters, 3,300 feet thick. The caves extend kilometers deep, so one can only imagine the depth at which the center is located. This depth and protection make the complex highly resilient to nuclear strikes and any other extreme impacts imaginable. It is said that the underground cave network is large enough to accommodate an entire city. The center is equipped with the latest military technology, at least there's no reason to doubt this. In 2017, state broadcaster CCTV aired footage showing part of the interior, including a 2-story main hall with a massive video screen spanning dozens of feet wide. The room also featured a podium, a wall covered with world maps, and a designated rest area for the Supreme Commander, that is, the President of China. On either side of the commander's seat were 2 rows of seats for other members of the Central Military Commission and high-ranking PLA officers, with various command workstations behind them. This is where all PLA actions, including operations by the Navy, Air Force and Strategic Missile Forces, would be coordinated in the event of a military conflict. The center's technological setup includes powerful communication systems, allowing instant contact with military bases and even Chinese forces stationed abroad. Beneath its depth and physical security, the complex is equipped with life support systems that allow it to operate autonomously for extended periods. In the event of a nuclear threat or other disaster, the entire command team can function from this center without needing to surface. The center also has air and water filtration systems, enabling occupants to remain inside without external supplies for several months. Currently, the JOCC symbolizes China's ambitions in defense and security, demonstrating how far the country has advanced in military technology and commanding in the 21st century.